Chapter 358, Public Challenge. Have you gone to see the Wasteland Beast chessboard? A student excitedly asked his classmate. Another student hurriedly took up the topic. Of course, how can I miss it? They are really strong. They say it is a very young Yao. I wonder which Yao art house this monster came from. There are Yao beyond Yao, bro. Student A said emotionally. Right? I had assumed before that all the geniuses were part of the Genius Alliance. Didn't think there would be people outside. Student B felt it was slightly impossible to believe. Ha, I've long found that group of lily-white faces an eyesore. They take away all the girls based on their strength, and leave us with nothing. A hero finally comes down from the heavens. Hero. He definitely has to strike a blow against their arrogant aura and save all of us. Student A spread out his arms and shouted. At the side, a snort suddenly came. Delusional. Student A was enraged and suddenly turned around his face. However, he instantly faltered when he saw who had come. He dejectedly pulled Student B and fled. Mu Wuxiang disdainfully stared at the two fleeing figures, but a shadow came over his mood. His steps grew slightly faster. He quickly reached the lecture room. When he stepped into the room, a wave of noise blew into his face. He unconsciously frowned. The terms of prison-breaking battle and wasteland beast chessboard continuously appeared. His mood became even more terrible. He noticed that when some students saw him, they purposefully increased their volume and made expressions in secret. Mu Wuxiang unconsciously clenched his fists. He snorted coldly, turned and walked out of the lecture room. Che, what genius alliance, that is a true genius, yes, yes, the sounds of discussion behind him burrowed into his ears. His face was blackened. In a depressed mood, Mu Wuxiang flew to Daytime Peak. Right now, it was class time and there were not many people on Daytime Peak. Standing on the 6,000 chi Daytime Peak, he looked into the distance. Mu Wuxiang's depressed mood instantly eased greatly. Ha, I guess you were here. A familiar voice came from behind him. Without needing to turn his head, Wu Wuxiang knew who had come. Jin Ling, his best friend from childhood. The two were from large clans, and had close relations. The two of them had played together from very young and could be considered childhood sweethearts. However, the two of them had developed a platonic friendship, and were like siblings rather than the more intimate relationship their parents wanted. Why concern yourself with these people? Jin Ling urged, it seems that we suppress them too much usually. Mu Wuxiang did not speak, but his heart eased. There were two members of Genius Alliance in Bright Might Yao Art House. One was Mu Wuxiang, the other was Jin Ling. Genius Alliance was a loose organization among students. It was established 400 years ago and was created by the 12 top genius students from the many Yao art houses of the Yao world. The Genius Alliance only recruited those with outstanding students. After developing for more than 4 centuries, the influence of Genius Alliance was much greater than it started with. In 4 centuries, each generation's alliance leader of the Genius Alliance was the undoubted leader of their generation of students. When these geniuses finished their schooling, if they would enter the important systems of the Yao world or they were managing major areas. In its 4-century history, 9 Sky Yao had appeared among their numbers. This was almost 7/10 of the Sky Yao that had appeared over this 4-century period. Each student thought it an honor to enter the Genius Alliance, and the scheduled exchanges inside the alliance was fatally attractive to these people who were cultivating maniacs. If they could enter the Genius Alliance, they would definitely have a bright future. However, these great talents also garnered much ire. On one hand, due to thinking highly of themselves, they were very brazen in their actions, and naturally did not attract favor. On the other hand, the elders that had already left the Genius Alliance liked to take care of their younger juniors in the Genius Alliance. This meant that the Genius Alliance was given a great amount of resources, and caused many Yao to feel it was unfair. The reason that this prison-breaking battle was related to the Genius Alliance was that the Genius Alliance had been planning on a prison-breaking battle recently. They were used to being high-profile, and so this plan had been made public early on so everyone knew. But at this time, the sudden prison-breaking battle that appeared caused the Genius Alliance's position to be very awkward. Those students that disliked the Genius Alliance before were naturally happy. The Genius Alliance that had never been in a reactive position before finally tasted what it was like to be roasted on a fire. However, these young geniuses were all very proud. How could they swallow this? Mu Wuxiang was also the same. Jin Ling's tone was light, but she also had a fire suppressed inside. Suddenly, the spirit imprint on Mu Wuxiang's arm lit up. Mu Wuxiang noticed the ancient character inside the light, and a blush came onto his black face. His eyes became excited. A ball of light floated from the spirit imprint and a face that they were very familiar with showed up. He said excitedly, "Great, both of you are here. Saves me from making another trip. Quick, come to the Wasteland Beast chessboard now." Mu Wuxiang and Jing Ling exchanged looks. They were excited. The alliance was going to act. The two did not waste words and instantly stood to fly with their greatest speed to the cultivation seclusion rooms. The two each rented a seclusion room, and entered the Wasteland Beast chessboard. They quickly found the alliance. 46 Yao. Mu Wuxiang and Jin Ling were all greatly shocked, and then they immediately became excited. It was possible to see how much the alliance prioritized this matter when so many alliance members were present. When they saw the youth that looked very honest at the front, they couldn't help but become excited again. He had a very interesting name, Huai Boy. He was one of the supervisors of the Genius Alliance. Those that had roles inside the Genius Alliance were those that were very powerful, more powerful than normal members. Huai Boy's appearance was very normal. He always had a smile on his face, appeared to be harmless, and honest. But today, the smile on Huai Boy's smile disappeared. The narrowed eyes were lit up. Just received news that the master of the Wasteland Beast chessboard has challenged us directly. Mu Wuxiang's excited expression froze on his face. He looked dazedly at Huai Boy, his mouth gaping. The other student members all had shocked and disbelieving faces. Challenging the Genius Alliance. Was this guy crazy? This has already been broadcasted by all the major Yao channels. We do not know if someone is scheming and pushing their agenda from the shadows, or if it is the person's challenge. But this is not important. Because we will use reality to tell everyone that doubts us. Who is truly the geniuses? Like usual, Nanyu entered the Wasteland Beast chessboard. However, today seemed. She looked strangely at the surrounding Yao. She noticed that they all seemed to be very excited. Has something major happened? Did someone activate the prison-breaking battle again? She shook her head and smiled, and felt amused that she would have such an absurd thought. I heard that the Genius Alliance are coming to break the Wasteland Beast chessboard. This sentence burrowed into Nanyu's ears. Nanyu shook and felt a basin of cold water had been poured over her head. What? Genius Alliance wanted to break Darren's Wasteland Beast chessboard. She focused and listened closely. Ah. Why is Genius Alliance at odds with the Wasteland Beast chessboard? I remember now. They seem to have said they were going to break a prison before. Had their goal also been vast water clear skies? Ha, you definitely do not know. The one making the challenge is the mystery person. Mystery person? The owner of the Wasteland Beast chessboard? Just that one. Go watch the news, they're broadcasting it everywhere. Nanyu wasn't in the mood to cultivate and immediately left the Wasteland Beast chessboard. Her room was just 4 walls, where would she have the Yao News tree? She hurriedly put on an outer garment, pushed open the door and flew up. She recalled that the center of the city had an enormous Yao News tree. She saw the Yao Nu's tree that reached up to the clouds from a long way off, and adjusted her direction to fly towards it. This Yao Nu's tree was the largest of the 3 closest cities. The enormous crown of the tree was like a small mountain with innumerable forts. Countless vines drooped down from the tree branches and were heavy with pod-like fruits. Yao filled all of the Yao Nu's tree. Nanyu picked a place with few people and landed. When she just steadied her body, her consciousness wrapped on a thin vine in front of her. With a pop, the fruit of the Yao Nu's tree exploded and turned to a multicolored mist. The rainbow mist quickly changed and became a beautiful female Yao. The female Yao's expression was very excited, and spoke very quickly. The mystery young expert that just finished the prison-breaking battle and reconstructed the Wasteland Beast chessboard has publicly challenged the Genius Alliance. We are now doing a special report about this matter. Up until now, the Genius Alliance has not made any formal statements about this matter, and the new master of the Wasteland Beast chessboard has not been seen. However, this matter is definitely not unsubstantiated. Maybe we will soon see a spectacular struggle. Nanyu's head rang. Impossible. This was impossible. Darren definitely would not challenge the Genius Alliance. This thought was so strong that Nanyu did not doubt it. She had not spent much time with Darren, but she did not feel that Darren, from any perspective, would be such an arrogant and impulsive Yao. There definitely was someone spreading fake information. Nanyu was not dumb and instantly understood. However, her expression did not turn for the better but became even worse. No one was ignorant of the power of the Genius Alliance. Almost all Yao knew what those geniuses were like. Regardless of whether this information was real, with the conduct of the Genius Alliance, they definitely would not rest. Why was it like this? Xixiang, move faster, Gong Sun Cha said, unsatisfied. In the fiendish mist, Zuo Mo's face instantly fell. After absorbing the soul base source of the fiend's souls, Gong Sun Cha's speed had increased, which caused Zuo Mo's fishing to be unable to keep up. Zuo Mo was discontent. So noisy. It's good that you even have something to eat. 10th grade flew up and down at the side, his little face slightly distressed. No, Xixiang, you have to be responsible for satiation since you are responsible for the food. Gong Sun Cha's face was rascally. The corner of Zuo Mo's eyes twitched. He forcibly suppressed the impulse to kick Gong Sun Cha away. Suddenly, his gaze focused and he stopped all movement. Raising his face, he looked towards the deeper parts of the fiendish mist. Sword Essence. Chapter 359, Activation Sword Essence. There was sword essence within the fiendish mist. Zuo Mo's eyes flashed. The sword essence coming from the fiendish mist was faint, but he was sure it wasn't an illusion. Out of caution, he closed his eyes and spread out his consciousness. A moment later, he opened his eyes. They were ecstatic. There were people. There were people inside the fiendish mist. Nothing could excite him more. He hadn't been this excited even after he completed the prison break battle. Ever since they stepped into this vast, desolate, and mysterious ancient battlefield, uncertainty and worry had always been clouds over his heart regardless of how calm and composed he appeared. There was no sign of life to be seen on this unknown ancient battlefield. This place was silent and barren, filled with danger. All the signs supported that this was a land of death. The scariest part of a dead land was the dangers all around it. The impoverished and dangerous environment meant that Zuo Mo and the others did not even have a chance to breathe. But now, Zuo Mo suddenly found that there were people existing in a place he assumed was dead. How could he not be ecstatic? It was like searching endlessly in the darkness, and suddenly seeing a glimmer of light. At least, they had a chance to rest. Zuo Mo believed that if they had enough time, they could definitely walk out of the ancient battlefield. There are people ahead. Zuo Mo pointed excitedly at the depth of the fiendish mist as he said to Gong Sun Cha. People. Gong Sun Cha was stunned. After a moment, he suddenly reacted. There are people inside. N. Suemo nodded heavily. Someone is using sword essence in there. In that direction. It's a bit far from us, but not impossibly so. I can feel it, but it is not very strong. What should we do? Gong Sun Cha hurriedly asked. Gather everyone, and we will advance in that direction. We need to be fast, or we will miss them. At this time, Suemo showed the decisiveness of a leader and did not hesitate in issuing instructions. Wei Xing stared at the fiend soul beast in front of him, the black sword in his hand slightly raised. However, his heart sank slightly. The body of this fiend soul beast was longer than 3 zhang. It was shaped like a scorpion. Between the two pincers, he was able to see the crisscrossing teeth that sent chills through his heart. Its body was completely covered in shiny, black armor covered with red seal scripts that curved like earthworms. There were 2 dark red dots for eyes that lit up in the fiendish mist, and shocked one's soul. Its body was close to the ground, the 2 pincers slightly raised as a dark and vicious presence tightly locked onto Wei Xing. This fiend soul beast had silently closed in with intentions of ambushing him. If it wasn't for the fact that Wei Xing's cultivation level had progressed greatly, his sword essence spiritually clear and taken to heart, Wei Xing himself was not sure he could survive after an ambush by such a vicious beast. However, Wei Xing did not panic due to his shock. He was not willing to show weakness, and his sword essence locked onto the other. This fiend soul scorpion seemed to know the prey in front of it should not be underestimated. It did not dare to move rashly, and it seemed very wary of the great black sword in Wei Xing's hands. The two descended into a standoff. Wei Xing closely watched the fiend soul scorpion, the black sword in his hand did not tremble at all. He had killed his every step the entire way on his trip through the fiendish mist. After continuous, hard battles, his body was very tired and at the end of its strength. The black sword seemed to lose its spirit. The aura had gradually faded. This caused Wei Xing to feel it progressing was even harder, and basically had left him no opportunity to rest. The exhaustion of his body was like a tide, wave after wave crashing against Wei Xing's mental defenses. Suddenly, Wei Xing recalled the time when he had been a sword servant. Just with his simple and crude sword art, he had been searching for his sword path in the wilderness. At that time, he had been so innocent and so satisfied. There were no conflicts inside the sect, no unspoken criticism about the sect, no other thoughts. He was like the sword in his hand, simple to the utmost. He lightly sighed. There were many matters in the world that people were helpless against, could not brush off or dodge. Like this patch of fiendish mist. It continuously corroded his Ling power. Now he understood why so many Xiuzha would stay in a distant place away from the troubles of the world. As Wei Xing's mind was distracted, the cunning and vicious fiend soul scorpion instantly seized at a chance. The glowing red eyes drew out 2 soul-shaking streaks in the fiendish mist. The speed of the fiend soul scorpion was like lightning. It was so fast, and the sound was so muffled that there wasn't even a vibration in the air. Wei Xing's heart was shocked. He knew he was in an unprecedentedly dangerous situation. When he had sighed just now, he instantly knew that the wandering thought was a sign of extreme danger. It meant that his body was weak to the point of collapsing, which was why his mental defenses had been so lax. But he had not expected this vicious beast to be so sensitive and cunning to accurately seize this chance. His wrist flipped, and the horse-chopping saber that was up to Wei Xing's chest seemed to be as light as air as it blocked in front of his chest. Dong! Among the sound of steel striking, Wei Xing's body shook and he retreated 7 steps. Wei Xing grimaced inside. If his condition wasn't so poor, then he wouldn't have retreated even 1 step under such a force. But his endurance, and Ling power had reached their tail ends. His battle experience was rich and he knew that the vicious beast in front of him was cunning and deceitful. It definitely had detected that he was weak inside. As expected, the red light of the fiend soul scorpion exploded. It did not attack, but like before, it dashed forward. Such a cautious beast. Wei Xing did not have the time to finish praising it when a great force passed over. He made a muffled grunt, and took 10 steps back before he steadied his figure. Was he going to be buried here today? Wei Xing sighed inside. Only now did the fiend soul scorpion truly confirm that Wei Xing had reached his last legs. It attacked without hesitation. It was very cunning, and knew that Wei Xing had almost no strength left, so it tried to use brute force to destroy Wei Xing. Dong dong dong. The sound of impacts were endless like a tempest. Wei Xing struggled to endure like a little boat in a hurricane, suddenly moving up and down as though he could be swallowed by the waves at any moment. The attacks of the fiend soul scorpion were relentless and as fast as lightning. Wei Xing was surrounded by danger. The already tattered clothing at this time was destroyed by the small yet sharp turbulence like butterflies in flight. A stream of blood came from the corner of Wei Xing's mouth. The Ling power in his body was drained, his channels started to crack. He would not be able to persist for much longer, as his channels would shatter into countless pieces, and his cultivation would instantly collapse. The black sword that had seemed vicious before was like a dull sword of ordinary metal without any sheen. Was he really going to lose his life here? Wei Xing was in a daze, his moves slow as though he could fall at any moment. Yet unexpectedly, after more than 10 continuous attacks, he was still standing, barely. If one looked closely, they would find that when the fiend soul scorpion's pair of pincers was going to strike him, the black sword in his hand would coincidentally appear in front of the giant pincers. The moment his body was in danger, Wei Xing would always make an instinctive response. Without conscious thought, without Ling power, his mind was completely blank. Dong dong dong. The hurricane was ongoing, so long it made one feel hopeless. Yet the scene was filled with weirdness. Wei Xing's eyes were wooden, empty and without thought, his movements were slow. Yet the instant the giant pincers were going to touch his body, his hesitation would disappear. His movements would be unspeakably simple and crisp, but when paired with his wooden expression, it was even stranger. It was as though if one more straw was added to his load, Wei Xing would fall. But no matter how the fiend soul scorpion tried, even when the giant pincers tore the air apart in their attacks, they were stopped by Wei Xing movements that were filled with strangeness. Nan Yu stood on the borderless wasteland beast chessboard. She bit her lips tightly. Just on her way here, she had already seen 7 groups of people from the Genius Alliance. The Genius Alliance did not have any intentions of disguising its retaliation. Dozens of the Genius Alliance supervisors continued to announce that they would definitely break the Wasteland Beast chessboard. The Genius Alliance were usually high profile, but declaring such a thing in public had never happened before. Anyone with eyes could see the master of the Wasteland Beast chessboard had infuriated the Genius Alliance. A guy that offended the Genius Alliance, what good outcome would he have? How could Nan Yu, who had been hearing of the Genius Alliance since she was very young, not know this? Before, the Genius Alliance was a place that was high and out of reach. She did not dare to even think of having a connection with the Genius Alliance, much less entering it. But in a night, the Genius Alliance actually became her enemy. How could she not feel terror? She knew they were targeting Darren, but as Darren's follower, Darren's enemies were her enemies. She felt great pressure from the groups of Genius Alliance members that appeared on the Wasteland Beast chessboard. Nan Yu did not know how many Yao were paying attention to the Wasteland Beast chessboard, but she could clearly feel that there were multiple times more Yao at the Wasteland Beast chessboard than there were normally. Hey, has there been a result? No. Supposedly, the Genius Alliance of Fixed Sky Jia have come. This is going to be something good to see. Fixed Sky Jia also came. Then isn't it already 6 Jia that have come? It's the 8th Jia. Central Pawn Jia and Lilium Jia also came. Wow, this scary. Yes, none of the Genius Alliance is willing to be defeated. How can they rest? In my view, even if this matter concluded here, this conflict won't end. In your view, who do you favor? It's hard to say. On the surface, the Genius Alliance of course has the advantage, but a person that set down the Wasteland Beast chessboard, can he be a nice guy? Only idiots would believe such a thing. Look at how many people came from the Genius Alliance, but no one has activated the prison-breaking battle. Hearing the discussion drifting into her ears, Nanyu felt unspeakably irritated and fretful. Which damned guys dared to slander Darren? They should be slowly sliced to death. At this time, a wave of sound suddenly came over. Prison-breaking battle. Someone activated the prison-breaking battle. The sound wave came from far and rolled over. Nanyu's head rang and blanked. Her face was pale as she was stunned where she stood. The Yao in the surroundings hated that they were born without two more legs as they furiously charged towards the prison battlefield. Countless Yao of different shapes formed a flood towards the prison battlefield. Nanyu was sandwiched in the middle and uncontrollably followed the flood towards the prison battlefield. How was it possible? How was? Was the Genius Alliance really this powerful? Her expression was filled with hopelessness. Chapter 360, Start. I didn't think that someone would activate the prison-breaking battle so quickly. It is slightly unexpected to me, Qian Lu said with a smile. The fire-faced person twisted his mouth. You're the only one interested in this low-level stuff. However, he had a proud expression, my skill isn't bad. Utmost base. Qian Lu did not hesitate in giving his opinion. But very effective. The pride on the fire-faced person did not decrease in the slightest. Qian Lu was too lazy to speak and stared at the prison battlefield. Huai Boy vigilantly paid attention to his surroundings. The supervisors of the Genius Alliance were set for each Jia had one supervisor. This year, Huai Boy was 20, and his strength and talent was undisputed to be able to become a supervisor of the Genius Alliance. However, Huai Boy had not thought that he would activate the prison-breaking battle. Of the 8 supervisors that had entered the Wasteland Beast chessboard, in terms of power, he was ranked in the middle. However, he quickly reacted, and was very excited. This was a chance from the heavens. There were not many rules in the Genius Alliance, but being rewarded for one service was the one upheld the strictest. There had been 9 Sky Yao to come out of the Genius Alliance, and 5 of them had left Yao arts behind for the Genius Alliance. This was added onto the wondrous techniques and strange arts that the generations of Alliance leaders had collected, which were all stored in a Yao art tree in the center of the Yao realm. This tree surpassed any Yao art tree from any Yao art house. This was a place that all Yao dreamed of. Huai Boy was not an exception. Huai Boy came from Ingwen Scholar clan. It was one of the major clans locally, but in all of the Yao realm, it could only be considered middling. The Blue Thorn secret art was a very good Yao art, but Huai Boy did not feel satisfied. He had become a supervisor of the Genius Alliance at such a young age and had great ambitions. No one, in the Scholar clan's history, had become a Sky Yao by cultivating Blue Thorn's secret art. How could he be satisfied? The clan did not withhold any resources when nurturing him, and used all kinds of methods to collect even more powerful Yao arts for him. However, each of the top Yao arts were peerless in value. After so many years, they still were unable to acquire a top Yao art. Prison-breaking battle, no matter what, he had to achieve victory. Huai Boy made a resolution. This service would probably be able to be traded for a pretty good Yao art. Come. Huai Boy's eyes lit up, and he was full of fighting spirit. The procession of boats silently and rapidly progressed in the fiendish mist. Of the 5 slave-transporting boats, the slave-transporting boat of Golden Crow Camp was at the very center. The formation scripts on the body of the boat released faint light. The Crimson Fiend Cauldron continuously transformed the fiendish mist into Ling power, and guided it into the formations carved on the boat. Compared to when it was made, the Crimson Fiend Cauldron was much smaller now. This was due to being used day and night without a moment of rest. The Ling power transformed by the Crimson Fiend Cauldron, a 5th grade talisman, was not just vast and rich, it was of high quality. As it worked day and night, this rich and pure Ling power was a small fire that finally baked the cauldron and continuously processed it. The Crimson Fiend Cauldron was created by everyone of Golden Crow Camp, and it was unprecedented in its invention. However, many parts of the Crimson Fiend Cauldron could not help but be somewhat heterogeneous due to the differences in cultivation of Sun Bao, Ji Wei, and the others. After a long period of Ling power forging, the impurities of the Crimson Fiend Cauldron were slowly processed, and its quality was higher than before, but its size shrunk greatly. Zhuemo was standing at the bow of the slave transporting boat at the very front. His gaze was fixed into the mist. The formations of the boat reflected light on his tense face, and flickered. Beside him, a Gui propped up her chin and copied Zhuemo to look into the distance. A Gui's wounds were clearly recovering, and her face gradually had some expression, even though it was still very wooden. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. There were hardship guards in black armor that ran around constantly on their patrol. Their expressions were watchful, and they were all hardship guards that had created their weapons. A Wen ran at the very front with the black spear in his hand. The bright red tassel was like a flame flickering in the wind. These guard camp elite that had finished forming their weapons were like fish in the water among the fiendish mist. They also became the primary combat force. Gongsun Cha led the Vermilion Bird camp, Shu Long led the guard camp, Xia Shan was on the last slave transporting boat as the rear guard. In the remaining slave transporting boat, Ma Fan sat on top of the boat. The other people of the Sky Peak platoon were scattered around the boat. After the epiphany last time, Ma Fan's sword essence had reached manifestation, and the suppression the fiendish mist had on him was minimized. Everyone seemed to be on their guard, their expressions heavy. A murderous presence was thick and roiling among the troop like an enormous beast slowly traveling close to the ground without hurry or slowness. Even though he was in a hurry to find the person inside the fiendish mist, but Zhuemo knew very well how dangerous the depths of the fiendish mist were. He did not dare to move without forethought. In such a dangerous territory, the slightest bit of carelessness could cause all of them to die. Lil, Pagoda and Lil, Fire nervously burrowed into a Gui's arms. Lil Black had a death grip on a Gui's hair. Silly Bird's expression was unconcerned. The tense situation did not invoke any response from her. 10th grade floated on the black antennae of the twin butterfly, the murderous and cold little face showing yearning. It was strange to speak of it. A ball of faint white mist still hung at the end of the white antennae of the twin butterfly and showed no signs of becoming tangible. 10th grade was born from the twin butterfly absorbing black fiendish energy. Rather than being afraid of the fiendish mist, he felt it was very intimate. However, his sense of danger was more sensitive than normal shouja. The deeps of the fiendish mist gave him a strong feeling of danger, so much that he did not dare to go deep in. He was proud, but he was not stupid. After fishing with Zhuemo and Gongsun Cha these past days, 10th grade had an even clearer understanding of the fiendish mist's dangers. Of course, most important was that the unreasonable and vicious bird was at the side. 10th grade glanced out of the corner of his eye at Silly Bird whose eyes were closed in rest, and instinctively shrunk his neck. There are people in such a damned place. Lei Ping rumbled, and could not understand. Maybe it is the lost descendants of ancient cultivators. Nian Lu brushed his bangs and fully expressed his imagination. Ancient cultivator descendants, the people in the surroundings groaned. This guy had read too many legends and rumors. Lei Peng's gaze landed on the hardship guards that were moving nimbly and was filled with admiration. This poor place really has a finger on our weak spot. But the guard camp, they are having a really good time. Even and wants to go cultivate, hardship guard. They were cultivating, Fiend Ling, but due to the short time cultivating it, they could just manage to defend against the corrosion of the fiendish mist. The fiendish mist that was filled with danger towards them wasn't just harmless against guard camp, but was beneficial. How could these people that were long used to leading the charge not be jealous? Don't be jealous of them. Nian Lu adjusted his clothing and said, "You can copy the captain. When your sword essence reaches the level of manifestation, you cannot be corroded by anything. The measly fiendish mist is naturally not an exception." Lei Peng was speechless. There seemed to be an invisible wall around Ma Fan's body. The red-black fiendish mist could not enter the area around him. Everyone did not feel any Ling power rippling, which meant that Captain had not used Ling power. This area had naturally formed after Ma Fan achieved sword essence manifestation. However, compared to starting from the beginning and cultivating, hardship guard, the difficulty of reaching sword essence manifestation was even higher. Unless they cultivated to Jindan, it wasn't just any normal monster that could reach sword essence manifestation in Ningmai. But even from Ningmai to Jindan, the difficulty involved. Blast it! Lei Peng shot out an angry breath. While everyone felt somewhat suppressed at not being able to charge at the very front, but they also felt slight anticipation. If there really were Xianxia inside the fiendish mist, then that meant they also could use their full power within the fiendish mist. They had persisted in practicing, Fiend Ling, but they needed to reach the third level before they could directly transform the fiend mist into Ling power. Before that, while they still could absorb fiendish mist and transform it to Ling power, the rate was very slow. That was fine for cultivation, but during battle, that meant that their Ling power would basically be unreplenished. Many of them put their hopes on the Xianxia inside the fiendish mist. Ping! A crisp collision sound occurred on the outside. Everyone's expressions changed. Enemy attack. This was the first attack they had encountered up until now. No one had good expressions. They had just traveled 50 li into the fiendish mist, and started to encounter attacks from unknown and vicious beings. The dangers up ahead could be imagined. The one that encountered the enemy was a one. A Wen's eyes tracked the unknown and vicious beast in front of him. This vicious being was shaped like a tiger or panther, the long and nimble figure filled with beauty. Its entire body was covered in thick metal-hard scales and layers and gleamed with a cold light. The paws on the ground had hooked and sharp claws that effortlessly dug into the soil. The eyes were set deep, the cheekbones protruded, but there were no eyeballs in the sockets, only red light. When a Wen's gaze came into contact with the red light inside the eyes of the vicious being, he felt his body tighten, and was shocked inside. Zhuo Mo's gaze landed on the vicious beast. Thinking about what Pu Yao had said to him before, he asked, "This is a fiend soul beast?" "Yes." Pu Yao's tone did not have the aloofness it usually did and was filled with gravity. "Such a powerful fiend soul beast. This fiendish mist has been through an unknown amount of time. I've never seen black fiendish mist of such intensity, and have never heard of it. This fiendish soul beast surpasses any fiend soul beast of my knowledge. You need to be careful." Zhuo Mo was shocked. This grave tone could be said to be very rare for Pu Yao. A strong feeling of danger formed, but Zhuo Mo forcibly suppressed it. He decided to see just how powerful this fiendish soul beast really was. A Wen was a lucky survivor of the dueling stadium and had experienced many cruel battles. The fiend soul beast in front of him gave him enormous pressure but did not cause him to lose his calm. A cold feeling came from the black spear. He suddenly had a burst of confidence. In the dueling stadium, he had defeated many opponents stronger than him, and now, he was stronger than before. The expression on the handsome face silently changed. Killing essence rose, his eyes vicious, a thick black mist came from the thenar space where he grasped his black spear, and like a black snake, it coiled around the black spear. His presence suddenly exploded, his vicious eyes glaring as he shouted lowly, "Kill." The black spear in his hand was held flat and thrust forward without finesse. Chapter 361, The Childhood Wish. Yi Zheng cut a sorry figure. His blue monk robe was in tatters as he staggered forward, lacking any of the usual grace that the sect taught him. However, who would care about grace at this time? He had never ever thought that the most normal sect mission would take him to such a ghastly place. Many times, he had thought that he had come to the Avicii hell that only appeared on the records. Fortunately, he had worked hard on his cultivation these years, and with eldest Xixiang's focused teaching, while his combat abilities were not strong, his body of steel tendons and metal bones was unrivaled. By relying on his great defensive abilities, he had managed to survive in this endless mist until now. Before, he had not understood why eldest Xixiang made him cultivate wisdom dhyana body, but now he felt the wonders of this dhyana technique. A circle of Buddhist script whirled around his body without rest. This was why the corrosive fiendish mist did not infect his body. Impervious to all evils, impervious to all evils, Yi Zheng continuously chanted. Beads of sweat could be clearly seen on his shiny and clean head. He had entered this mist for just 3 days, but in these 3 days, his heart jumped around, and he was very afraid. He was a dhyana shio, and most sensitive to corrupt, mean and fiendish beings. But this fiendish mist in front of him was endless, and it was so dense it was almost unimaginable. Other than hell, Yi Zheng really could not think of a place that would have such vicious fiends. Fortunately, his wisdom dhyana body could naturally subdue these corrupt beings. Even though he had struggled on his way, but he was not wounded. However, his heart did not dare relax. Even the records of the sect had never mentioned such a vicious place. The vicious beings it formed would definitely be terrifying. Exterminate evil? Don't joke. Yi Zheng was very clearly how much he was worth. He believed it was a miracle that he had not been wounded up until now. Right now, he could only hope that the news of his disappearance would quickly arrive to the sect, and the sect would send people to rescue him. Actually, at the bottom of his heart, he also knew that chances were very small. He was only a person at the borders of the sect. He did know how long it would take for the sect to respond after his disappearance. He thought about eldest Xixiang, thought about how eldest Xixiang would be further neglected now that he was not in the sect. His mood instantly became slightly low. He aimlessly traveled through the fiendish mist. After walking for a short while, sounds of fierce combat could be heard from up ahead. Yi Zheng was startled awake. After pausing, he was overjoyed, and ran with bare feet towards the sound. The sound of battle became clearer. He quickly saw a man fighting fiercely with a fiend soul scorpion. He carefully walked closer. When he saw the scorpion closely, he couldn't help but inhale sharply. More than 3 zhang tall and 2 pincers, each the size of a door. Yi Zheng felt his scalp become numb. If he was grazed by those enormous pincers, even his wisdom dhyana body definitely would be unable to tolerate it. My dear Buddha. Yi Zheng swallowed with difficulty. His gaze seemed to be glued and unable to be moved away. It was not due to the great strength of the scorpion, but how strange the scene was. The scorpion's opponent was a sword shio. Even though the black sword looked more like a horse-chopping saber, but Yi Zheng recognized that the other was a sword shio at first glance, and a very traditional sword shio. Such a strong sword shio. Yi Zheng was greatly alarmed. He recognized the origins of this scorpion. Fiend soul beast, this was a fiend soul beast, a vicious being born from the fiendish mist. He had previously been worried that the corrupt grounds would produce something extraordinary, but upon seeing this fiend soul scorpion, he finally realized just how powerful these vicious beings created were. If Yi Zheng's mind was clear now, his face would be pale and alarmed, but at this moment, his gaze was completely attracted by this odd-looking battle. The expression of the sword shio was dull, as though he was ill, his movements were slow and his gaze wooden. Every time the enormous pincers of the fiend soul scorpion were about to tear the sword Xiao in half, his slow movements would suddenly become nimble, and stop the giant pincer by a hair. The confused expression on the sword Xiao's face, the dull and slow responses, and the sudden nimbleness formed a strong contrast and was very weird. After watching for a few moments, Yizheng felt his Ling power roil and showed signs of losing control. He paled greatly. In terms of the peacefulness of Ling power, Diana Xiao were blessed by the heavens. His Ling power was going wild just because he was watching someone else fight. Yizheng started his core scripture before he dared to look back at the battle. The signs of his Ling power escaping his control instantly disappeared. Yizheng exhaled. His eyes returned to the person and scorpion that were fighting. The amazement on his face increased. He looked at the sword Xiao as though he was looking at a ghost. Before, he had thought that the sword Xiao was in danger, and would be killed at any time. Now that he saw it clearly, he found to his shock that there seemed to be an invisible stickiness to the sword Xiao's black sword. The vicious fiend soul scorpion was like a puppet manipulated by many strings and was struggling in this invisible force. A terrifying sword essence. Yizheng could not detect the sword Xiao's sword essence at all. At this moment, he admired this sword Xiao's strength greatly. It wasn't that he had not encountered sword Xiao before, but it was the first time he had seen one so powerful. Also, the other seemed close in age to him. So young and possessing such power, it definitely was an accomplished disciple of a large sword cultivating sect. Was he a disciple of Kunlun? Once he saw the state of the situation clearly, Yizheng was not in a hurry anymore, and thought about how he would exchange greetings with the person later. He was slightly stuck. This was his first time off the mountain, and he had no experience to speak of. However, being able to encounter a Xiaozhe in such a dangerous place, Yizheng felt his luck was already pretty good. After a while, the battle still had not finished. Now Yizheng saw that something was wrong. The sword Xiao's expression was confused and showed no signs of waking up. Was he? Yizheng was daring but paid attention to details. His mind moved. After waiting another moment and seeing the situation did not turn for the better, he thought for an instant and then started to chant in a low voice. Countless scenes flashed across Wei Xing's eyes. They were mirages and shadows, but they were also so clear. The resolution he made as a child, the pursuit of it without fear through dangers, through hardships, sustaining wounds, comprehending the sword at the waterfall, becoming the eldest disciple, drinking alcohol with Swashiti under the stars, the order from the sect. Countless scenes merged together and suddenly formed an enormous net that swept over him. There was no place to escape or dodge. The net grew tighter and restrained him. He felt he could not breathe. The feeling of suffocation filled his entire body. He was like a fish in the net. The more he struggled, the tighter the net was. Why? Why was it like this? I only wanted to cultivate the sword. A burst of anger suddenly came from deep in his heart. He was like a beast trapped in a net that struggled fruitlessly. Why? It was like a silent shout, a furious bellow. Why? He shouted at the top of his lungs, he wailed sorrowfully. In a daze, he dreamed of a patch of stars. In the dark night, the stars in the sky were numerous. A light wind brushed across an empty wilderness. The faint blue sparrow-tailed grasses swayed in the wind. A child about 7 or 8 years old was sleeping amongst the grass. Raising his head to look at the light streaking across the sky, the tender child voice carried deep amazement. So beautiful. The child jumped up from the grass. The wind brushed across his face and revealed his glittering eyes. A seed was silently planted in the heart of the child. The dream was so real, as though he could touch it, but distant like how the moon reflected in the water's surface. At this moment, Wei Xing was like a statue. He looked dazedly at the child. Suddenly, something seemed to burst in his heart, and something came forth. The distance and unfamiliar childhood memory suddenly floated into his mind. Some reasons he had forgotten, those simple thoughts, they were like the blue sparrow-tailed grass seeds bursting from their shells, germination, and then growing. Yes, my dream is to cultivate the sword. A pure dream, a pure pursuit, a wish that a child made under the stars. A strange relaxation came into his mind. The feeling of suffocation disappeared without a trace. Wei Xing looked entranced at the child underneath the stars. A slightly smile came onto his face, and warmth was shoved into his chest. Yes, it all came from this affection. The complex and common mortal matters that made him feel helpless seemed so small, so insignificant. He opened his eyes, his gaze was clear without any impurity. Ling power suddenly flooded from his dry channels like water sprouting from a spring. When this new Ling power passed, the parts of his channels that had been wounded instantly became filled with life like a tree welcoming spring. The Ling power that followed out was endless. In a short period of time, his Ling power had reached his best state. However, the Ling power showed no signs of stopping. They continued to rush into Wei Xing's channels, and filled every bit of the channels. When all of Wei Xing's channels were filled with Ling power, the new Ling power started to progress towards his dantian. Wei Xing did not stop it. He did not do a thing. But that pair of eyes became even bright in the fiendish mist. It was filled with joy, joy from the heart. A faint light covered the black sword in his hand. The fiendish mist around him seemed to suddenly be pushed by an enormous force, pushed far from Wei Xing and vanished in the blink of an eye. Yi Jing gaped as he looked at what was happening and even forgot to continue chanting. Crack! The fiend soul beast shattered into dozens of pieces without warning and dropped to the ground. The cuts were peerlessly smooth. Even that pair of unbreakable pincers were dismembered into several sections. A sword shadow appeared behind Wei Xing. The shadow of the sword went from blurry to clear, and continued to grow. In a few dozen breaths, the sword figure was dozens of zhang tall. The tip of the sword pointed at the sky. It showed no signs of stopping. It broke through the fiendish mist as though it was going to pierce the sky. Under the colossal sword shadow, Wei Xing stood majestically. Thunder rolled through the fiendish mist, tens of thousands of fiend soul beasts howled simultaneously. The blood-red sky seemed to boil. A worldly apparition. Chapter 362, When fighting all out, Huai Boy's head was covered in sweat. He had solved 5 of the dozen problems in front of him, but he was stuck on the 6th question. The hourglass beside him did not show any signs of stopping. Seeing the layer of sand at the top half decrease at a visible rate, another layer of sweat appeared on Huai Boy's forehead. He had never thought that the prison-breaking battle of the wasteland beast chessboard would require him to solve problems. In this era of Yao art houses, intermediate Yao arts made up the majority of Yao arts, working cooperatively in groups was the mainstream. In the history of Yao, there had never been such a time when teamwork had been so emphasized. To gather the power of a team to explore Yao arts was the dominant method. The Yao art houses that understood this, and could teach their student very well. Analysis and deconstruction were techniques which every student was required to learn. In order to exercise the student's skills, a rich library of problems could not be lacking. In addition to those public question banks, each Yao art house had their own question banks. As one of the top students of a Yao art house, solving problems was a task that he was very familiar with and skilled in. However, his confidence had been quickly crushed in front of the 12 questions of the prison battlefield. Truthfully, when he encountered the 3rd question, he had started to sweat. These problems were not esoteric. Quite the opposite, these questions were in an area every Yao was very familiar with. Little Yao arts. Even though he was at the 6th question now, it was still a problem about little Yao arts. To Huai Boy, the little Yao arts that were the rudimentary and quite distant in his memory. He had finished learning little Yao arts before he had entered the Yao art house. How old had he been then? 6. 7. Huai Boy himself couldn't remember it. However, these problems concerning the simple little Yao arts made him feel helpless from the bottom of his heart. The problems that were formulated were not obscure, the ways of thinking were not weird, they were actually open and honest. This made him feel the failure even more. He encountered difficulty on simple and straightforward little Yao art problems. Huai Boy's face was slightly ashen. Compared to Huai Boy's nervousness and depression, the spectators outside felt this scene was very boring. There were no dazzling lights, no murderous presences, no complex and profound changes. The honored prison-breaking battle was a student solving problems, yet only Huai Boy could see the problems. They could only be bored and count how many beads of sweat were on Huai Boy's forehead. The fire-faced person was totally bored and complained, "What are they doing? I thought I could see something major. This long, and it's so boring. If I knew it would be so boring, I wouldn't have gone to the trouble." "Don't be impatient," Qian Lu could only comfort. "The result will be out soon." He hadn't expected the prison-breaking battle of the wasteland beast chessboard would be solving problems. He had never heard of such a peaceful and non-violent prison-breaking battle. "That boy can't do it." The fire-faced person glanced over and snorted coldly, strong on the outside and dry on the inside. The fire-faced person suddenly changed his way of thinking and had a smile filled with schadenfreude. There's going to be drama to see now." "Drama?" Qian Lu did not react in time. Truthfully, he was slightly disappointed too. Think about it. The little guy that those old farts taught can't even outcompete others on solving problems. Won't their faces be even more ugly than they already are? The fire-faced person was very smug. In their style, solving problems is a fundamental skill. If their fundamentals are less than others, is there anything that is more ironic than this? Thinking about it, the fire-faced person seemed to visualize the ugly faces of those old people and laughed freely. Qian Lu finally reacted. The fire-faced person was not wrong. The old farts and the young brats shared a characteristic. They were conceited. Conceited Yao always thought highly of their face. If they lost 3 Yao spells, that was not anything major. But if they lost on solving problems, no matter if it was the old guys or the young brats, they definitely would not accept that. Thinking about it, Qian Lu couldn't help but feel anticipation. That guy came out. The fire-faced person was very excited. Qian Lu took back his thoughts as his eyes landed on the battlefield. The prison battlefield resumed its original appearance. Huai Boy dejectedly and woodenly stood in place. He had failed. In the fiendish mist, 2 figures flickered in and out of view. Wen's speed was just slightly less than Zhuomo's light void wings. Wearing black armor, it was as if he was a black bolt of lightning. Wen was able to rival the fiend Soul Panther's speed. It had explosive speed and power was. Each impact echoed like thunder. Everyone's expressions became serious. Xu Long tightly gripped the long ji in his hand, and prepared to give aid at any moment. Both sides were amazingly fast. Even the members of Vermilion Bird Camp that always aspired towards rapid attacks had slightly changed expressions. Many people were judging inside. Could they retreat unharmed under such an explosive and sharp attack? Other than the small minority that could maintain their calm, the great majority had ugly expressions. They did not have a grasp of the battle. The rhythm was so fast it surpassed their imagination. They gaped with wide eyes at Wen's light and rapid figure. Was this still the clumsy and slow guard camp? One person and one panther were like 2 bolts of black lightning that chased each other and struggled. The hard spear thrust randomly and could freely pass through the void, far and near without any dead spots. It was unable to be defended against. The strength of the fiend soul panther also surpassed everyone's expectations. Its speed was not any less, and its strength was greater than Wen's. The sharp spear that howled as it thrust looked like it would be shattered with a blow. People's hearts felt cold when they saw this. If that blow really landed, they would instantly be crushed into powder. Wen hadn't expected this fiend soul panther would be this hard to deal with. He was much stronger than before, but he still could not do anything to the panther in front of him. No, he had to battle quickly and not hinder the advance of the troop. They had just entered the fiendish mist. The monsters that roamed the deeps of the fiendish mist would be even more powerful. If he could not defeat this panther, what would he do in the future? Thinking about it, Wen's presence suddenly became vicious and murderous. Xiaxan's expression was shocked. Ma Fan also had an astonished expression. They were very sensitive to presence and could clearly detect Wen's change. To kill the other. Boom! The red tassel turned to a ball of red fire that enveloped the head of the spear. The black fiendish energy coiled around the pole of the spear and burrowed into the burning spear point. The fiend soul panther showed desire to retreat. It was intelligent. The troop in front of it was enormous and not one he could tear something off. If it was wounded here, it wouldn't just have lost its prey, even it would become the prey of the other fiend soul beasts. It slowly retreated. Wen's eyes were deep black, the black energy shrouding the black armor as the spear point burned. A familiar feeling came. Every time he decided to go all out in the dueling stadium, he would enter this strange state. The killing essence in his body boiled, but his heart was ice cold. This strange state was the talisman that saved his life and allowed him to fortunately survive so many cruel battles. This was the first time Wen decided to go all out after entering guard camp. The contents of Hardship Guard flowed like water across his mind. His eyes became even deeper. The black armor on his body was exquisite and light like it was made from layers of feathers. It was unique in guard camp. At this time, the black armor on his body slowly swayed as though it was alive. It caused the people watching to have goosebumps. The layers of metal feathers spread up Wen's face, and became a mask of small feathers. Clang clang clang. There was a string of sounds of iron brushing together like many blades being suddenly pulled out of their sheaths at the same time. Many long feathers suddenly bounced out of Wen's black armor. The long feathers were extremely thin, the edges as sharp as knives. In an instant, a vicious and murderous energy suddenly spread out. Arching his body and holding the spear, Wen's legs were slightly spaced apart as he bent down slightly. Wen raised his face. His slender black feathers of his mask had a fine shine that was savage and cold. The fiend soul panther smelt the scent of danger and retreated even more quickly. In a blink, it disappeared in the fiendish mist. Just at this time, the steel-long feathers that rose up off Wen's black armor shook simultaneously. A power that could destroy mountains and upend seas instantly passed into his right arm. He yelled under his mask, "Kill!" The black spear suddenly disappeared from his hand. Pia! A light sound of rupture came from the depths of the fiendish mist. Everyone's expressions changed. Wen fell down face first. Before his body could reach the ground, he was caught by a black-armored hand. It was Xu Long who had managed to get to him. Xia Shan's figure flashed and burrowed into the fiendish mist. He returned after 2 breaths, and had a panther on his hands. There was a hole the size of an egg on the fiend soul panther's forehead. The hole penetrated the entire head. On Xia Shan's hands, the fiend soul beast quickly turned into threads of black energy. Zuemo hurriedly ran over to Xu Long. "How is he?" "No great harm. Just exhaustion," Xu Long said respectfully. Zuemo's heart landed now. He had originally wanted Wen to test the power of the fiend soul beast. He had not expected this handsome person to have such a fiery personality and actually kill the fiend soul beast. Everyone was shocked by Wen's spectacular attack, especially Vermilion Bird Camp that usually had bug eyes. They received the greatest blow. The biggest impression they had of Guard Camp was the Crow Fiend MO kill formation. In their views, the individual combat abilities of the hardship guards was not strong. But Wen's performance today completely flipped their entrenched impressions. So Guard Camp had already grown to this level. Zhuo Mo's attention was then put onto the Fiend Soul Beast that Xia Shan had taken over. The Fiend Soul Beast quickly dissipated, and only felt behind a paw and a bead. The panther paw was covered in fine scales, and extremely hard. The sharp and curved long claws up to 5 cun long were the most eye-catching. The bead was the size of a thumb, glowing and transparent. It wasn't ordinary. This was not the time to investigate these items, so Zhuo Mo carelessly threw them into his ring. Zhuo Mo suddenly raised his head, his eyes as sharp as a sword that pointed straight at the deeper parts of the fiendish mist. Xia Shan and the others were only a beat behind Zhuo Mo. They all raised their heads and looked with shock at the fiendish mist in front of them. A black tide was quickly spreading from the deeps of the fiendish mist towards them with astounding speed. Everywhere it passed, everything turned to black void. This black tide came extremely quickly. In a blink, it came in front of Zhuo Mo and the others. The void that seemed endless swallowed everything. The fiendish mist that was so corrosive turned to nothing. Zhuo Mo's procession seemed to be situated in a void. At the middle of the void, an enormous sword reaching the sky entered everyone's eyes. Xia Shan, who was already in Jindan, was completely pale now. Like his tail had been stepped on, he shouted in a high pitch, "Sword essence." Ma Fan, Shu Long and the others had white faces. Zhuo Mo seemed to be struck by lightning. His body freezing suddenly, he dazedly murmured lightly. Eldest Xixiang. Chapter 363, The Prison Breaking 6. These are the problems I encountered. Huai Boy's mouth felt bitter. He had thought he would become a hero and had unexpectedly ended up with nothing. He had received the heavy blow in a field that he had never thought would cause him trouble. In the next few days, his mind would be quite scattered. He had memorized the problems, including the unsolved sixth problem. The other supervisors came over. Little Yao Arts. It is actually Little Yao Arts. They all wore shocked expressions. Some people felt it was nothing. How hard could a Little Yao Art problem be? Huai Boy saw the dismissive expressions, but he did not argue. The noise quickly faded. After a while, everyone started to sweat. No one had a dismissive expression anymore. In a patch of silence, everyone's sweat increased. This junior's name is Yizheng, a disciple of the great Buddha temple. Yizheng rearranged his clothing and respectfully said with a bow. The greeting he gave was one of a junior. The worldly apparition had stunned him. He could clearly feel the difference of the sword Xiu's before and after states. Was that core formation? He wasn't sure, but any breakthrough that was accompanied by a worldly apparition was extraordinary. This was why he had given the bow of a junior even though the other did not look older compared to himself. Wei Xing opened his eyes. The ephemeral presence around him suddenly disappeared like it had been brushed away by wind. His eyes became peaceful again like a sharp sword being sheathed so its edges could not be seen. But after experiencing that soul-shaking scene, Yizheng did not dare to slack off and offend. Even more, he glanced at the remnants of the fiend soul beast that had been cut up into multiple pieces, and his heart tightened. I am Wei Xing, from Wukong Sword Sect. Wei Xing smiled, his attitude warm and peaceful. It's an honor to meet you at last. Yizheng hurriedly said. Wei Xing roared with laughter. Mine is a small sect. You definitely have not heard of it. Yizheng instantly became a bit embarrassed. He did not know what it was. Even though this Wei Xing's attitude was friendly and warm, but he still felt an invisible pressure. It was this invisible pressure that caused him to do some actions that he usually would not. "You can just call me Wei Sheng." Wei Sheng waved his hand. "Not elder, I don't want to be old so quickly." Yi Zheng instantly felt a predicament, but he had a spark of inspiration. "Big brother Wei." Wei Sheng smiled and did not argue. He asked, "How did you come to this place?" Speaking of this, Yi Zheng's face instantly became a bitter gourd. "I don't know either. I took a mission from my sect and assumed that I could earn some contribution points." It was unknown who leaked the information, but the 6 problems of the Wasteland Beast chessboard's prison-breaking battle quickly spread. All the major Yao channels were studying these 6 little Yao art problems. When many Yao first received these 6 problems, they were very dismissive. Many Yao were even suspicious that these prison-breaking 6 problems were fake. Little Yao art problems, what a joke. But no matter if it was those that were dismissive or curious, what all the Yao did when they first received the 6 problems was strangely similar: they tried to solve them. They quickly discovered just how laughable and naive their thinking had been. At this moment, those spectators that had been so bored outside the prison battlefield finally understood how soul-shaking the seemingly boring prison-breaking battle had been. Little Yao arts were the fundamentals of all Yao arts. No Yao or school of thought would doubt this. The study of little Yao arts had only been of interest in the Yao art houses for a few years before their study was considered complete. It was not that the Yao of the time dismissed little Yao arts. It was the exact opposite. They put great importance on little Yao arts. Due to this, they had put in great amounts of Yao power and ran through all the permutations of little Yao arts. From that onwards, there were almost no new developments in little Yao arts. Those with knowledge at the time started to put more effort into intermediate Yao arts and high Yao arts. The prison-breaking 6 problems seemed to be like throwing 6 heavy stones into a peaceful pond churning the shores with great waves. The 6 little Yao art problems, put in their order, went from easy to hard. The first 3 were extremely easy and did not leave the scope of the present little Yao arts. But starting from the 4th question, it went beyond the scope of the general understanding of little Yao arts. Truthfully, Huai Boy was very skilled to have been able to reach the 6th problem. With the aid of his firm foundation, even though there were new transformations, he still used his outstanding intelligence and managed to solve the 5th problem. But up to here, he could not go any further. His head was filled with the 6th problem. He did not eat or rest, and his mind was scattered. Higher Yao, like Qian Lu, could detect a completely new road from these 6 problems that increased in difficulty, a road that was completely different than what the general understanding of little Yao art was now. This discovery made them happy and filled with curiosity. As Yao that cultivated to their level, how could their eyes be shallow? Presently the 6 little Yao art problems were the most popular topic of study for the Yao art houses. The teachers of many Yao art houses acted, but they quickly all encountered a roadblock. Consequently, many little Yao art study teams came out of every Yao art house like spring bamboo after the rain. Zhang Zhe stayed in a corner and didn't dare to breathe. The reason was very simple. The room was too silent. Staring at the tips of his feet, his heart was a storm. This was definitely the most silent meeting of the Council of Elders in the clan's history. The elders of great status and power had furrowed brows and did not make any sound. What does everyone think? The one that spoke was the clan leader, Zhang Zhe's father. However, even though Zhang Zhe's father was the clan leader, but in this room, Zhang Zhe did not have a place to sit. In fact, if it wasn't that he had successfully established a dialogue with the master of the Wasteland Beast chessboard, he wouldn't even have had the qualifications to enter this room. The Genius Alliance will not rest, an elder said hesitantly. If we worsen our relations with the Genius Alliance, it won't be good for us. Everyone knows that. Do you need to waste your breath? An elder that did not have a good temper snorted coldly. But he knows, Grey Scar Art, that's what he says, it may not be true. The room descended into noise. Those that were shouting, those that had faces red, those that were winding up their sleeves to start fighting. Xianxia released a breath, and felt much more at ease. The clan leader really could not bear it anymore and said in a deep voice, "Stop." The voices finally calmed. The clan leader turned around his face. "Chief Elder, what do you think? Has everyone seen the 6 problems?" The chief elder opened his eyes, his voice was hoarse. The elders all nodded. "What does everyone think of these 6 problems?" the chief elder asked directly. "Pretty interesting. Profound. Unique." The elders chattered. The chief elder shook his head. He waited for everyone to stop talking before he opened. "In my view, these 6 questions open a new school of thought within Yao arts." When these words came out, the others rumbled. No one had expected the chief elder to have such a high opinion of the 6 little Yao art problems, but no one doubted the chief elder's judgment. Because his judgment in countless matters had proved that chief elder's eyes were terrifyingly accurate. "Do we have any relationship with the Genius Alliance?" the chief elder suddenly asked. "No." The other elders shook their heads together. They might have some power locally, but for them, the Genius Alliance was high up and unreachable. "Without a relationship, there is no saying that our relations will worsen," the chief elder said faintly. But his authoritative gaze contained a thread of heat. "Everyone seated here today understands what gray scar art means to us. There are no free benefits in this world, so everyone should understand there is no profit without risk." The chief elder suddenly stood. "Does everyone remember their oaths when they entered the Council of Elders?" The other elders were excited and simultaneously stood. "Do not dare to forget. We have waited for this chance." The chief elder looked at the old visages of the other elders and sighed deeply. "Waited for too long." Chapter 364, Reunion. Standing in the middle of the 5-element sword formation, sweat was flowing down Zhuomo's back. A glowing and transparent water-shaped flame jumped silently in the air above the formation. 2 opposite presences of icy cold and explosively hot formed an exquisite balance. It was the first time that many people saw Zhuomo's water sword essence, and they had curious expressions. In their impression, Zhuomo during battle was like an ancient wasteland beast, especially his brutal and physical attacks that gave people great shocks. They knew that Zhuomo had once been a sword xiu, but they rarely saw Zhuomo using a flying sword. It was true that Zhuomo had decreased his use of a flying sword, especially after cultivating the Great Daimo physique. All 6 changes of the Great Daimo physique were extremely powerful, both speed and power were so strong it was almost absurd. The other important reason was that his improvement on sword essence was not very large. He didn't know why. If he cultivated Mo skills and Yao arts, he advanced 1,000 li a day, but when he cultivated sword scriptures, he was just slightly better than the average shouja. He gradually found that the power of the Li water sword scripture could not satisfy his demands. He had even gave the 5-element sword formation to Vermilion Bird Camp to use to comprehend sword essence. When he discovered the sword xiu in the fiendish mist was very likely to be eldest Xixiang Wei Sheng, he instantly started to hurry. What was most important now was to get in contact with eldest Xixiang. Otherwise, if the 2 of them moved past each other, it would not be easy to find each other again in this fiendish mist. The worldly apparition just now should be eldest Xixiang making a breakthrough. As expected of eldest Xixiang, Wei Sheng's talent in the sword wasn't just a bit stronger than his. The void sword essence that eldest Xixiang had released during his breakthrough had given him inspiration. If eldest Xixiang could detect his sword essence, couldn't he get into contact with eldest Xixiang? Eldest Xixiang had just made a breakthrough, his energy and mind should be in his best condition, and it would be easier for him to detect the sword essence that was released. In order to release the strongest sword essence, Zuemo even took out his 5-element sword formation that he had not used for a long time. In the 5-element sword formation, the water element formation was his Li water sword essence, and it was perfect for this purpose. The Li water sword scripture that he had not used for a long time seemed multiple times more difficult to control at the beginning, but he gradually found the feeling. In the cold and silent water flame sword essence, the explosive power was like the undercurrents beneath the surface of the water. Zuemo channeled Ling power in and the 5 flying swords lit up. The sword essence also grew explosively. Zuemo's sword essence had not improved, but his Ling power and skill in formations were much stronger than before. When he used all his power, the sword essence instantly became large. Ling power was being used up with astounding speed. Zuemo gradually had an expression of effort on his face. The other people looked on curiously as Zuemo set up a formation and casted his sword scripture. They did not understand Zuemo's intentions. After a while, a thin thread-like howl sounded from deep within the fiendish mist as though it came from the horizon. This howl was very weak, but everyone present had pretty good strength and could detect it clearly. All of them were alarmed and readied their guard. The howl became louder and started to hum. 2 breaths later, the sound changed and became thunderous as it neared with terrifying speed. Xia Shan and Ma Fan paled. Before they could react, a sword shio on a flying sword appeared out of the air in front of everyone. The sword shio stared hard at Zuemo inside the sword formation. Boom! The fiendish mist behind him exploded towards the 2 sides without any warning. With explosive sounds, a ruler's straight and wide passage appeared behind him as though it was opening a road in the fiendish mist. The air gusted and blew, but the figure of the sword shio did not move at all. A breath later. Whoosh! Like an avalanche, the fiendish mist followed the long path behind the sword shio. The tailwind was so strong. Everyone's desire to fight almost instantly collapsed. No matter if it was Xie Shan and Jin Dan, or Ma Fan that had his sword essence manifestation, or Shu Long that had formed his weapon, their rock-hard mentality cracked a sliver. The figure appeared first before the sound came. Such speed was shocking to even hear about. Is it shitty? Eldest Xixiang. 2 voices were filled with joy and emotion as they sounded at the same time. Wei Xing jumped down from the flying sword in front of Zuemo. After examining him for a moment, he smiled brightly and said, "This appearance is much more pleasing to the eye than before." Lin Qian had a jade scroll that had Zuemo's new appearance mirage. This was the first time he had seen Shitty's new face in person. The face in front of his eyes was very unfamiliar, but Wei Xing could still feel the familiar presence. This caused him to smile. Zuemo felt something in his throat, and his nose went sour. Wei Xing patted Zuemo's shoulder and smiled. He said, "It is a happy occasion for us brothers to gather together. Don't be like a woman. Eldest Xixiang should not underestimate me." Infected by Wei Xing's smile, Zuemo puffed out his chest and pretended to be a manly man. The 2 looked at each other. Finding the joy in each other's eyes, they laughed together. None of them had thought that they would encounter each other in this place. The joy at reuniting overcame everything else. The dangerous fiendish mist seemed so adorable right now. The 2 of them did not worry at all. The situation at the front line was stabilizing. Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia was already completely possessed by Yaomo. Previously the Jia was like the Xiujia's backyard, where they hunted Yaomo, and was now split between the Yao and the Mo. She looked at the completely transformed Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia. She was filled with confidence that the Yaomo would achieve the final victory of this war. Wherever she looked, countless Waryao trees formed a forest. The air was filled with the poison released by Highland Hell's bells. Even Jindan Xiujia, if they were careless and their Ling power touched the poison, they would be in extreme danger. Large amounts of dangerous plants almost covered all of the empty ground. For Xiujia, this was definitely a swamp. If they entered, they would not come out. But for Yao, in this place, their advantages could increase their combat abilities multiple times. Supposedly, the Council of Elders was inviting some Sky Yao Darren to add another layer of defenses to the bloody Sky Metropolis Jia. By that time, the Blood Sky Metropolis Jia would be impenetrable. In the region that the MO had occupied, they were changing it to grow Mo Seed C. Once the Mo Seed C was constructed, it would become a natural barrier that was almost impossible to cross. In Mu Shi's view, if the Yaoma could construct the defensive line of Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia, the Yaoma would be in an undefeatable position and have the initiative. From the start of the war until now, the strategic goals of the Council of Elders had been fulfilled remarkably well, and the results were outstanding. The reason that it had proceeded so smoothly was due to the element of surprise. The long peace had numbed the high levels of the large Xiuzha sects, so in this stage of battle, the responses of the Xiuzha were very slow, and they continuously lost. What would happen next was that the war would enter a state of attrition. This was a cruel and tragic phase. Mu Shi did not dare to underestimate the Xiuzha. On the surface, the Yao were dominating, but she knew what they had encountered up until now were the fringe sects of the Xiuzha. She suddenly thought of the youth called Lin Qian and the elite Xiuzha under his command. Lin Qian had the great mannerisms of a general, and had pointed out her origins from a single sentence. What shocked her was that he was a battle general with abilities comparable to her. How many battle generals did the Xiuzha have that were like Lin Qian? She did not know. In the higher levels of the Yao realm, no one assumed that they would easily obtain victory. The Xiuzha had won the 1,000-year war. They had captured a countless amount of resources. Adding on the development of 1,000 years, no one knew how rich they were. So before starting the war, everyone had prepared for hard battle. However, the victories came easier than expected. She was worried that the string of victories make some of the elders overconfident. In these few days in Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia, she occasionally would hear young combat Yao in groups that demanded to continue their advance. This place had an overzealous mood, and showed signs of losing control. In the following battles, if they relied on the defensive line of Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia, and turned this place into a meat grinder that would greatly reduce the strength of Xiuzha, and when the final battle came, the Yao would have a great advantage. If they attacked first and lost the strategic advantage of Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia's natural barrier, they would end up in an extremely reactive position. However, she knew her words carried little weight, and could only keep her worries to herself. It probably was that she was just worried for nothing, she mocked herself inside. The middle-aged person did not think as deeply as Mu Shi. The busy scene in front of him caused all the blood in his body to boil, and filled with the desire to fight. However, he had been Mu Shi's vice-commander for a long time and was very familiar with Mu Shi. He asked in curiosity, "What is Darren thinking?" "Nothing." Mu Shi shook her head. Noticing that Mu Shi's mood was not good, the middle-aged person was slightly puzzled, but he was wise and did not ask. He switched the top and said with a smile, "Does Darren know? Something big happened recently." "What big matter?" Mu Shi said disinterestedly. "Vast water clear skies was broken, the new prison is called Wasteland Beast Chessboard," the middle-aged person said with a smile. "Oh." Mu Shi was slightly astonished. Of course she knew of vast water clear skies. Even though as a battle general, her proficiency with normal Yao arts was very average, but she still knew vast water clear skies. How many years had it been since the last prison-breaking battle? Seeing Mu Xia finally have an interested expression, the mood of the middle-aged person became slightly better. He narrated, supposedly, many people saw that prison-breaking battle. The entire battle was very fierce, but this mysterious youth in the end succeeded. However, the matter is just beginning. Rumors quickly spread that this youth was challenging the Genius Alliance. Someone is causing trouble. Mu Shi raised an eyebrow. This subordinate thinks the same. The middle-aged person continued, but this youth did not come out and refute it. Darren, you also know the personalities of the Genius Alliance. Proud. Mu Shi unhesitatingly blurted out. She suddenly thought of her younger brother that had the label of a genius. He also was a member of the Genius Alliance. The clan had great hopes for him. Darren's evaluation is very accurate, the middle-aged person said with a smile. So how could the Genius Alliance let it rest? They gathered and decided to break the Wasteland Beast chessboard. The prison-breaking battle should not be activated so easily. Of course, but Genius Alliance is really full of geniuses. One of their supervisors really activated the prison-breaking battle. And then? Mu Shi asked curiously. Her appetite had been whetted. In that prison-breaking battle, the prison battlefield demanded that this Genius Alliance supervisor to solve 12 Yao art problems within a required time. At first, this supervisor had a smooth time, but he was left stuck on the 6th question, and in the end, did not complete the prison-breaking battle. Such a pity. Mu Shi smacked her lips, but her tone was not pitying at all. When this supervisor came out, he wrote down these 6 problems, and this caused a great ruckus. What type of Yao art problems are these 6 Yao art problems? Mu Shi was very sensitive. The middle-aged person's expression was slightly strange. Little Yao art problems. Little Yao art. Mu Shi's face was shocked. Her expression quickly became weird. She could imagine what expressions those geniuses had when they saw the 6 little Yao art problems. These 6 problems are being called the prison-breaking 6 problems. Even though they are little Yao art problems, but they are very difficult and of a new perspective. They clearly are of a new school of thought, the middle-aged person said sternly. Mu Shi nodded. She understood the difficulty involved. Unexpectedly, this matter had new developments yesterday. The expression of the middle-aged person became strange again. Chapter 365, Let's have a discussion. The 6th problem had been solved. The news swept through almost all the Yao art houses like a strong gust of wind and was as if someone had thrown a spark into a pot of oil. Originally, the prison-breaking 6 problems were unexpected and unconventional, but it was not enough to cause everyone to pursue a solution. Even though the conflict between the mysterious prison-breaking Yao and the Genius Alliance had been aggrandized, those with some intelligence would not put too much importance on it. The matter clearly a manipulation by someone from the shadows. Everyone watched it with the intentions of witnessing the spectacle and for amusement. No one believed the mysterious prison-breaking Yao could defeat the Genius Alliance. Any normal Yao would clearly arrive at this conclusion. So when Huai Boy had succeeded in activating the prison-breaking battle, everyone watched but felt it was expected. Everyone had been speculating on when the Genius Alliance would break the prison. One of the Genius Alliance's supervisors had activated the prison-breaking battle. The Genius Alliance had so many supervisors. Breaking the prison was just a matter of time. The prison-breaking 6 problems were novel to everyone, and showed everyone a completely different way of thinking. To be able to create something unique in the little Yao arts which had been studied so thoroughly, the strength of the mysterious prison-breaking Yao could not be underestimated. Some powerful great Yao and famed teachers from famed Yao art houses gave their praises, and were in agreement that they favored the potential of the mysterious prison-breaking Yao and thought his future was limitless. Even as the prison-breaking 6 problems increasingly attracted the attention of more and more Yao, but in the eyes of the public, this wasn't anything. Each year, a few brilliant stars would appear and be praised by these so-called famed teachers, but the great majority would gradually grow dim and lose their standing. But just as everyone was waiting for the Genius Alliance to make a new move, everyone noticed a strange occurrence. The solution to the 6th prison-breaking problem had not been announced. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. The topic of the mysterious prison-breaking Yao versus the Genius Alliance had lost its fervor and interest waned, but there was still no news of the answer to the 6th problem. It wasn't known who first mentioned this strange situation, but it instantly attracted everyone's attention. Was the sixth problem this difficult? Everyone had been somewhat disinterested in this matter, but their appetites were whet again. The people inside the Genius Alliance did not place much importance on this matter. They were full of confidence. Huai had not successfully completed the prison breaking, but it definitely was a good beginning. Young geniuses. The Alliance did not lack geniuses. Many supervisors were wondrously in consensus over this matter. They did not disturb the higher ranks. They firmly believed that they could solve this matter based on their individual strengths. Yet when the outside world started to discuss when the answer to the sixth problem would come out, they suddenly found to their shock, that without their notice, they had all been stuck on this problem. Now everyone was in a hurry. The branches of the Genius Alliance at each Jie changed their lax attitude and quickly formed teams to work together on the problem. At last, on the ninth day, the answer to the sixth problem came out. The appetite of the outside world was very high. When the sixth problem's answer came out, it pushed the matter of mystery prison breaking Yao versus Genius Alliance to the top again. Everyone suddenly found that it wouldn't be so easy for the Genius Alliance to win. A battle with great power disparity naturally would not be interesting to many eyes. But when the underdog they had thought would lose in one round had endured for 10, left in a better shape than they anticipated and with a glimmer of hope, the interest of the spectators skyrocketed. There wasn't just one or two groups that wanted to see the Genius Alliance be left looking like fools. "We must retaliate," the supervisor from the Lilium Jie said excitedly. His temper was explosive to start with, and he had been very stimulated by the words from the outside. "Yes. We have to retaliate," the other supervisors agree with excited expressions. When had these proud individuals ever endured so much mockery and disdain? They firmly believed that the Genius Alliance gathered the most outstanding geniuses of the Yao. They felt very proud of themselves for being among them. Just took us a few extra days of effort, and all the scum have come out. We have to make them see the reality. Another supervisor shrugged with a helpless expression. Even if it is a bit cruel. What does everyone think? We can't just get beat up like this. When has our Genius Alliance ever lost like this? The supervisor from the Lilium Jie said. Very simple, increase the reward. Yes, brave ones will come for a great reward. The Yao supervisors had a common enemy and all gave their suggestions towards a plan. Everyone contribute a few credits. Once we have a few hundred. I don't believe that no one in the Alliance won't take it. I will contribute 10 credit points. I will donate 20. The supervisors discussed and felt that this was a good plan. Not every member of the Genius Alliance had an outstanding family to support them. The Alliance did not lack members that came from those poor families. The majority of these people that entered the Genius Alliance chose to do so due to the great benefits the Genius Alliance provided. These Yao cared about material gain, and not reputation. They usually did not interact with these supervisors, and could be considered to be a clearly separated group. However, these Yao had a fatal weakness: credit points. The credits of the Genius Alliance were really just contribution points. They were able to exchange all kinds of Yao arts and worldly treasures for credit points from the Alliance. When they encountered a troublesome problem, the supervisors instantly remembered these people that they usually looked down upon. In the corner, Huai did not make a sound. His complexion was fragile, but an indiscernible cold smile floated at the corner of his mouth. These past few days, the other supervisors had been ignoring and shunning him, and he deeply felt how cold people here were. He knew the reason. Many supervisors felt discontented that of all the supervisors it was he that activated the prison-breaking battle. If he had succeeded, he would be a hero and the discontent would have been suppressed. They would have fawned over him. But he was defeated, so he became the target of disdain. He suddenly felt he was slightly laughable. Why was he together with such an ungenerous and obnoxious crowd that thought highly of themselves? He silently looked on and smirked coldly inside. The troop would advance a distance every day. If they stopped, Xuemo would start drinking with Wei Sheng. The alcohol wasn't anything good, but the two were very happy when they drank. They spoke of what happened to them in these few years, reminiscing on the interesting things that happened in their sect in the past. They sighed. Speaking of it, if it wasn't for these incidents, we wouldn't be who we are today. The alcohol was going to Xuemo's head. He did not use Ling power to suppress the effects of the alcohol. He said with a smile, without the troubles and worries in the past, how could Xixiang's sword heart be so strong? Without the dangers along this road, I don't know in which little corner I would be in trying to pass the days. I'd probably be just farming Ling fields or something. Right. Wei Sheng gulped down a large mouthful of alcohol, and allowed the excess liquid to freely flow down along his neck. He suddenly said, "Shitty, what is your goal?" Goal? Xuemo stilled. He tilted his head and thought for a while. Then he counted on his fingers as he said, "First, heal a Gui, and then investigate my origins. However, this second matter cannot be forced. I don't have too much hope. Most importantly, make more Jingshi and give everyone good days so I do not fail them for choosing to accompany me through these dangers." Ha! Wei Sheng gave a booming laugh. "Apart 3 days, I have a different view of you. Shitty in the past was the one most afraid of trouble. You now have great goals. Good, good." Xuemo, who had been preparing his emotions and preparing to start persuading again and didn't react in time and almost spat out the alcohol. What? Choked by the wine, Xuemo had dead fish eyes as he turned to look at Wei Sheng. Wei raised the alcohol pouch and put it in front of Xuemo. He smiled freely. Yes. Xuemo was overjoyed when he reacted. Raising his alcohol pouch, the two pouches collided together. That night, Xuemo dreamed of Xixiang as a giant that killed in all directions at the front, and he was at the back and furiously counting Jingshi with a dumb smile on his face. So much Jingshi, he couldn't count it all. Chapter 366, Yizheng of the Great Buddha Temple. Opening his eyes, Xuemo felt a splitting headache. He finally recalled that he and Xixiang had drank all night and apparently had gone crazy later on, singing and dancing. He didn't even know how they had finally passed out. He struggled up and walked out of the room. The outside was still misty. Not far away, Xia Shan was respectfully asking Wei Sheng for advice. He occasionally nodded and was as obedient as an underling. Xuemo lifted the corners of his mouth and silently snickered. It must have been that Xixiang's worldly apparition that had deeply shocked Xia Shan. Xuemo did not disturb the two and randomly walked about. The 5 slave transporting boats were placed apart and formed an enormous circle around the campsite. Having suddenly added a strong member, everyone's morale grew. They put even more effort into their daily cultivation. The worldly apparition when Wei Sheng had his breakthrough hadn't shocked just Xia Shan. A one had awoken. Thinking about how the fiend's soul beast had forced him into such a state, and especially in front of boss, he was very dejected. Starting early in the morning, he started to run around the campsite wanting to encounter another fiend's soul beast to defeat. The warlike 10th grade was not willing to fall back and tightly followed behind. Lil, Pagoda and Lil, Fire affectionately nudged a Gui. A Gui was wooden and would only respond once in a while. Whenever it happened, Lil, Fire and Lil, Pagoda would be very excited. Silly Bird raised her head high, and stalked around with her unique bird walk as she passed majestically beside Xuemo without even glancing at him. For some unknown reason, Xuemo's heart was filled with warmth. His mood seemed full of sunlight and was unusually bright. Even the blood-red sky seemed to become much more amicable. He suddenly remembered that the fiend's soul beast A1 had killed had left behind a paw and a bead. He hurriedly took them out. The paw was as hard as steel, deep black and shiny. The claws on the paw were especially sharp. When he gently swiped it against the ground, it created 5 deep scratches. With Suomo's eyes, he was unable to distinguish what kind of material it was. This is a fiend heavy weapon, very rare. It is a natural weapon. It is the first time I have seen a fiend heavy weapon of such quality. You brat, you really have good luck. Only a vicious fiendish land sealed for tens of thousands of years like this can form such powerful fiend soul beasts, and produce these kind of fiend heavy weapons. Pu Yao was filled with emotion. Suomo waved the paw around a bit, and felt it was not very comfortable. He said, "This is probably worth a lot of jingsha." The emotional Pu Yao stopped breathing. His temple throbbed. He forcibly suppressed himself. This isn't for Shouja use, it's for Yao. Suomo was very disappointed, and his expression was disinterested. If something could not be traded for jingsha, how could it be considered good? He had so many subordinates that cultivated AMO skills, but there were none that cultivate the Yao arts. Wait, he suddenly thought of the flower slaves in guard camp. Didn't they cultivate Yao arts? They can't use them. Pu Yao finally learned the joy of beating down Suomo's hopes, and drawled, "What they cultivate is the flower Yao coexistence art. Their weapon is the Ling flower in their bodies. Oh, they should be called Yao flowers now. Fiend heavy weapons are vicious things, they are not something that normal Yao can use. Could not be traded for jingsha, none of his subordinates could use it, and neither could normal Yao. Was this just trash?" Without another words, Suomo threw it into the ring, and picked up the bead. This is something good. Suomo became alert. He didn't understand something like the fiend heavy weapon, but he could recognize this bead. Normal fiend souls would have a thread of soul base source. How could fiend soul beasts not have any? This bead was their core, and inside was a huge amount of soul base essence that was extremely pure. Upon further thought, Suomo understood. These fiend soul beasts were formed from fiend souls. They consumed other fiend souls and continuously grew. It would take at least 100,000 fiend souls to form a fiend soul beast. Fiend souls beasts had a basic intelligence and instinctively understood how to cultivate the rudimentary spells of the fiendish energy. No one had disturbed this ancient battlefield for tens of thousands of years. The fiend souls formed here had experienced the cruelest slaughter. It could be imagined how strong their soul was. Suomo instantly found that the fishing they had been so proud of before was really very inefficient and idiotic. Out of the corner of his eyes, he coincidentally saw Gongsun Cha coming over. His body flashed and he jumped next to Gongsun Cha. Before Gongsun Cha could relax, he shoved the bead into Gongsun Cha's mouth. With a moment of inattentiveness, Gongsun Cha's eyes bulged out as he was tricked. One breath later, Lil Thmish's shy face that originally had a faint blush became completely red. Gongsun Cha's entire body quickly became red. He pointed with a trembling finger at Suomo but could not say a word. His eyes suddenly widened, and then he ran away. Ha! Behind him was Suomo's heartless laughter. The fiend heavy weapon was useless, the core bead was used to trick Lil Thmish. Suomo suddenly felt that there was nothing to do. The troop was temporarily resting at this spot. Through Shixiang's description, Suomo knew that the size of this fiendish mist surpassed his imagination. The native beings that he had originally thought were present turned out to be eldest Shixiang. Now he wasn't in a rush to advance. Golden Soul. Did you forget Golden Soul? Pu Yao couldn't resist reminding. Suomo hit his head. Right, how could he forget that matter? Yi Zheng's shock grew. He might not be a core disciple of great Buddha temple, but he had rudimentary knowledge. Great Buddha Temple was already a strong sect in their Jia, but his eyes swept across those Xianxia working hard at their cultivation. Even though it was not the first time he saw them, his heart couldn't resist jumping. The cultivations of these Xianxia were not high, and their Ningmai cultivation were comparable to the normal disciples of the temple. However, if the disciples of the temple had a conflict with these group of people, not even their bones would remain. This was killing intent. Killing energy that made his heart beat rapidly. Elite. This word suddenly jumped into his head. Only those elite that had experienced hundreds of bloody fights would have such concentrated killing energy. The temple also had these kind of elite Dhyana soldiers. He had seen them before. Those Dhyana soldiers did not have high individual cultivation. One would only know how strong they were only when one fought them. They were vicious and battle-hardened, and did not care about sustaining wounds. Yi Zheng had once been completely suppressed by a Dhyana soldier with a cultivation lower than his own. In the following 5-on-5 match, they had not even lasted for 20 breaths before they lost. If it wasn't that it was a match with the sect, they would have died. This Xixiang, greetings. A warm and gentle voice sounded from behind him. Yi Zheng's mind shifted. Turning around, joy instantly came onto his face. He was facing a Dhyana Xiu. This troop actually had Dhyana Xiu. Yi Zheng carefully examined the other. Even though the other was not wearing a monk robe and a kasaya, but the trace of a Dhyana Xiu aura could not be faked. He instantly felt much closer to the other and hurriedly returned the greeting. This little monk gives greetings. This little brother is Zong Ru. If Xixiang has any matters, you can find me. Zong Ru had a faint smile hanging on his face. Yi Zheng felt astonished inside. The other's cultivation was not lower than his. Dhyana Xiu emphasized their samadhi skill the most. He gave a slight smile as well, and bowed deeply. Xixiang is too courteous. This little brother is of low cultivation, I am currently lost and in need of help. Please, Xixiang, take care of me. Everyone is together in this dangerous land. Helping each other is rational. Zong Ru smiled and waved his right hand. Why don't we go this little brother's room? If Xixiang has any questions, please ask there. Yes. Yi Zheng hurriedly said. He followed behind Zong Ru and walked as Xianxia occasionally bowed to Zong Ru along the way. He thought inside, it seemed that this Zong Ru Xixiang had a high status among this group. Zong Ru's room was very simple. Other than the 2 meditation mats, there were no other objects. A simple place, you have seen a joke, Zong Ru said with a smile. No, no. Xixiang's place is perfect for the serene samadhi path. This little brother feels admiration, Yi Zheng hurriedly said. Zong Ru smiled. Which sect does Xixiang come from? Where did you cultivate before? Yi Zheng thought inside that the true aim had come out. He answered, this little monk is a disciple from Great Buddha Temple, and cultivated at He Residence Mountain before. Great Buddha Temple. Zong Ru made a sound and suddenly thought of something. He asked with shock, Great Buddha Temple of Temple Si Jia. Xixiang knows this humble temple. Yi Zheng slightly let out a breath at the other's shock. To his shock, he found that everything he had seen in this day and night had unconsciously put pressure on him. The honored temples, Great Buddha Dhyana Records, is one of the 8 great Dhyana records of Xian Kong territoires and is renowned. This little brother may be sheltered and ignorant but still knows the honored Great Buddha Temple. Yi Zheng did not feel any smugness. If it really was like the other had said, Zong Ru would not have made a sound like he did. His mind shifted. Where did Xixiang learn? Zong Ru gave a reminiscent expression. He said with a smile, speaking of that, I'm not afraid Xixiang would laugh. This one has no teacher. This one only encountered a master in the past that passed on some basic Dhyana spells. Yi Zheng did not believe it. Zhong Ru's cultivation was clearly not weaker than his, and his samadhi skill was even deeper. The study of any other spells could have the possibility of a shortcut, but not samadhi. Even if it was a fundamental, but there was no room for shortcuts. Zhong Ru's Ling power ripples were as deep and steady as the ocean. His samadhi skill was clearly very high. Seeing Yi Zhang's expression, Zhong Ru understood. He did not explain. Xixiang has come from the Xiankong territories, we have come from the Kunlun territoires. There are thousands of li between us. It is a matter of dhyana karma that we have met on this ancient battlefield. Yi Zhang nodded. Xixiang's words are great kindness. He already believed the words. Almost all the dhyana Shio temples of the world gathered in the Xiankong territories. The Kunlun territories were famed for their sword Shio. He had never heard of them having a large dhyana Shio temple. Upon closer examination, he found that while Zhong Ru had deep dhyana cultivation, but it was possible to see signs of age and hardship between the brows. He clearly had gone through hardships in his cultivation. The dhyana Shio disciples of large temples did not like luxury, but they did not have to worry about material things. They could rest their hearts and cultivate their dhyana, and it was rare for them to have hard times. He suddenly thought of the ancient battlefield that Zhong Ru had just mentioned, and couldn't help but ask, this is an ancient battlefield? N. We came in from the outer fringes, and saw many corpses and bones along the way. But it has been too long, and they would disintegrate when touched. Darren said that this ancient battlefield is tens of thousands of years old. Zhong Ru did not conceal it. Tens of thousands of years. Yi Zhang's expression shifted, and then he sank into 10,000 years. Ancient battlefield, the great Buddha temple was one of the 8 great temples. With a long history, it had many temple records. He thought back and tried to recall what records would match this. Seeing Yi Zhang in deep thought, Zhong Ru did not hurry him and patiently waited. A long while later, Yi Zhang suddenly murmured in a low voice, "Can it be, can it be?" Deep terror suddenly appeared in his eyes. Pu Yao didn't even bat an eye and said irritably, "Don't bother me with these insignificant nobodies." Seemed that this wasn't a famous faction. Suemo silently judged according to Pu Yao's response. Have they made trouble for you? Suemo's courage grew and his tone was slightly unfriendly. No, Nan Yu weakly replied. She hesitated before saying, they are trying to find trouble with you. Me? Suemo pointed at his nose as he asked in shock. Nan Yu quietly narrated the cause. Looking at Darren's attitude, he did not seem to know the Genius Alliance. Her explanation was very detailed. However, how could Darren not know Genius Alliance? How could there be a Yao that did not know the Genius Alliance? Understood. Suemo nodded and smacked his lips. With a dismissive face, he made his final conclusion. They don't have the skills, and dislike people that earn more than they do. Seeing Nan Yu's face was still worried, he waved his hand and said, why care about them? A deranged group. Putting so much effort into prison breaking, there isn't any money there. Full of it and have nothing better to do. Nan Yu and Sang Zei's expressions were strange. At this time, they could not find the words to describe their current mood. Darren was really deep and profound. He. It really is full of it and they have nothing better to do. A sweet voice passed over. A shapely body appeared in everyone's field of view. The tight evening dress highlighted her curvaceous body, the full and soft chest almost bursting out, the hair styled in a high updo and revealing the snowy white neck. A faintly discernible smile on the face, was highly seductive. There was a small mole at the corner of her red and moist lips that added a hint of enchantment. Sang Zei and Nan Yu were dazed. This female Yao was like a burning flame that could melt people's bones. This restless feeling was a bit familiar. Suemo was dazed for a moment and then was furious. She dared to use illusions. The tragic memory that the paper crane female had left on him back on Wukong Mountain surfaced in his mind. Gu hates illusory techniques the most. The furious Suemo did not hesitate to give a powerful counterattack. His hands secretly made a move, little thousand-leaf art, bone-crushing obscuring flash. A invisible wind spread in ripples. The female Yao seemed to be heavy-struck. Her body shook, and her face paled as she gave a delicate cry of pain. Her expression was pained, her brows slightly creased, her eyes unfocused. On the slightly bent body, the snowy white mounds on her chest moved. Even the delicate cry was seductive and caused people's hearts to heat up. Zhangzai's breathing suddenly became heavy as his eyes turned red. Nan Yu also felt her body was unusually heated. She felt the female in front of her was overbearingly beautiful. Such a powerful illusory technique. Still not giving up. Suemo glared and his anger increased. His hand gave 3, bone-crushing obscuring wind. Bone-crushing obscuring wind was the 9th move of Little Thousand-Leaf Hands. After the encounter at Hundred Flower Alliance, Suemo had relentlessly urged Pu Yao to teach him a move of Little Thousand-Leaf Hands that specialized in breaking illusory techniques. He hadn't thought he would encounter such a powerful illusory technique the first time he used it. 3 bursts of wind hit the female Yao at the same time. The female Yao's eyes suddenly straightened as though she was struck by lightning. Her hairdo exploded. As her locks fell down, a stream of blood came from the corner of her mouth. The hate-filled and piercing voice suddenly stopped. The light flashed on her body and she disappeared. She had been pushed out of the wasteland beast chessboard by Suemo's 4th, bone-crushing obscuring wind. Suemo finally released a breath. Turning his face, he saw Zhangzai and Nan Yu look dumbly at him, and warned them gravely, "This female's illusory technique is very powerful. You have to be very careful. Do not fall for it." Illusory technique. Nan Yu and Zhangzai looked at each other in confusion. They still did not know what had happened. Where had there been an illusory art? Had there really been a powerful illusory art? Zhangzai's heart was filled with regret. It was the first time he had seen such a seductive being. Such a pity. But why would she cast an illusory art? Even though he was filled with regret, Zhangzai finally calmed down and felt that Suemo was even more powerful. It definitely was a very powerful illusory art if he hadn't detected it at all. Darren's strength was, as expected, immeasurable. He suddenly rejoiced slightly that the Council of Elders had made a correct decision. "Darren," he said with unusual respect. Suemo was still immersed in the satisfaction from defeating the illusory technique with the bone-crushing obscuring wind. Suemo knew some of the Little Thousand-Leaf Hands. At the beginning, Pu Yao had taught him 5 moves, and then periodically taught a few more here and there. However, Suemo always felt that the effect of Little Thousand-Leaf Hands was average, even less than the Skyglass Wave, and was far cry from the Great Daimo physique. However, this time, he experienced the exquisiteness of Little Thousand-Leaf Hands. If he was familiar with the move, he would have defeated the other's illusory technique with 1, bone-crushing obscuring wind. Would he have needed to cast it 4 times? Suemo finally recalled that the Great and Little Thousand-Leaf Hands were created by a Sky Yao, and naturally was extraordinary. Just a half-learned illusory technique and dare to show off in front of GE, they don't want to live. If she knew GE's glorious battles in illusory formations, she definitely wouldn't dare. Before GE learned bone-crushing obscuring wind, GE still defeated the illusory technique of the Hundred Flower Alliance. Suemo felt very proud. The only grudge he had left was the paper crane girl. If he encountered the paper crane girl now, he would definitely pin her down on the ground and then beat her until her head swelled like a pig's head, get a batch of jingsha off her, and then use a similar illusory technique on her before letting her go. Darren. Zhangzhe did not discover that Sui Mo was still in his fantasy and said with the utmost respect. The clan has agreed to give Darren 10 golden souls annually as tribute. Good. Sui Mo refocused and was overjoyed. He hurriedly asked. When will you give the golden souls to me? Zhangzhe suddenly had a feeling that he seemed to have met a conman. Darren wasn't a conman, right? He muttered inside but did not show any of it on his face. He carefully reminded, Darren, do you remember, the gray scar art? Oh, right, wait a moment. Sui Mo hurriedly found Pu Yao. Pu Yao's eye at this moment was like a hungry wolf that gleamed eerily. He stared at Sui Mo for a while without a word. Sui Mo's hair rose under his gaze. He muttered inside, was Pu Yao also going to cast an illusory technique? Pu Yao stared at Sui Mo for a while before shaking his head and saying to himself, black-hearted, really black-hearted. Speaking of this, Sui Mo's spine instantly became straight. He instantly said, full of disdain, getting the benefit and you still complain. If you feel it's black, take one less golden soul. Pu Yao's mouth was instantly tightly closed. Right, the more we make, the more we can divide. Sui Mo had an expression like he was teaching a child. He reached out. Give it. What? Pu Yao instinctively asked. Gray scar art. Don't you want the golden souls? Oh. Pu Yao instinctively threw a ball of light at Sui Mo, and give me that, South Sky arrow art, along with it so I don't have to run over again. Oh. Another ball of light. Sui Mo contentedly left the sea of consciousness before Pu Yao could react. You antique from thousands of years ago, how can you fight with GE? Don't you know that GE is the sun at 8 or 9? The present is GE's, the future is GE's, all of it is GE's. Before the satisfied Sui Mo could make the transaction, a cold voice interrupted. You are the master of the wasteland beast chessboard. A male Yao covered in blue marks stared coldly at Sui Mo. The master of the wasteland beast chessboard. Sui Mo rolled his eyes but did not answer him. He asked Zhangzhe. When will we carry out the transaction? The blue Yao swept Zhangzhe and said neutrally, the Grey clan is very daring to dare be enemies against our genius alliance. Zhangzhe's pupils suddenly shrunk. Genius alliance? Sire, who are you? Qinghua Zhang Shui, the blue Yao said faintly. Zhangzhe's body shook and a layer of fine sweat began to cover his forehead. His business disturbed, Sui Mo instantly became discontent. He flipped his hand, and a little stool appeared. He shoved it in front of the blue Yao. Hold this. N. Qinghua Zhang Shui looked with puzzlement at the stool made from Yao arts. His gaze flashed. It was very rough and simple. Was he planning to compete in Yao arts? Sui Mo pointed. There, take the stool. Go to the corner and draw circles. Qinghua Zhang Shui's indigo face instantly became red. In an instant, his mind turned blank. Humiliated, he had actually been humiliated. Chapter 368, Battle of Tongues. As the exceptional successor of the young generation of the Blue Flower family, Qinghua Zhang Shui had a talent unrivaled within the clan. Cloud Ridge Blue Flower had been a famed and influential clan that flourished for thousands of years and never declined. Each generation had outstanding descendants. If they went back a few hundred years, the Blue Flower clan had occupied a seat on the Council of Elders that oversaw the entire Yao world. The present Blue Flower did not have the status of its past, but it was still a large sect that was firmly established and admired. Compared to them, the Grey clan was just a wild, little clan from some backwater mountain, so when Xianxia heard the other's name, he instantly became silent. Usually, just based on the words, Cloud Ridge Blue Flower, Qinghua Zong Shui could charge recklessly anywhere. When had he ever been humiliated so? When had the Blue Flower family ever been humiliated like this? Qinghua Zong Shui was so ashamed that he could die. A burst of hot blood rushed into his head. His eyes glaring, he pointed at Suemo and gritted, "Those that humiliate my Blue Flower family shall die." Suemo rolled his eyes. "Are you mental? Am I humiliating your Blue Flower family?" "So, you," the anger in Qinghua Zong Shui's chest calmed slightly before he was interrupted by Suemo, "Who I am humiliating is you." Suemo looked at Qinghua Zong Shui like he was looking at an idiot and said mockingly, "Just a person like you, you aren't ashamed to be called a genius? Don't come out to frighten people. Oh, you definitely want to kill me right now, I know this. So, people like you only have this little bit of patience, only this bit of breadth of chest. Compete with me." He suddenly increased his volume. "What qualifications do you have to compete with me? Does the Blue Flower family have more face than other people? You who eat soft rice, go and break the prison. Don't bother me before you break the prison. Gu is very busy, understand?" Qinghua Zong Shui's face flushed, turned black and then white. His entire figure wavered unsteadily. "Pooh!" Qinghua Zong Shui's blurred figure suddenly exploded into a ball of light and disappeared. Suemo shook his head and sighed. He is mentally weak, his mind is really low in quality. Turning around his face, he looked at the gaping Nanyu and Xianxia. He said, "Ooh, let's continue." A shriek filled with fury came from the room. Ji Qing stopped in his steps and then forced himself to push open the door. Pia. An extremely fine crystal decoration smashed loudly beside his feet into countless pieces. Ji Qing did not dare to block the shrapnel and allowed the crystal shards to hit his body. He wore a smile as he said in a fawning tone, "Sis, what is the matter? Who made you so angry? I'll go beat him up. Grind his bones into powder, skin him and pluck out his tendons." His voice suddenly stopped. Ji Liu stared fiercely at him. Whoa! Old Sissa's angry face was filled with killing intent. In that pair of eyes that enchanted countless male Yao was burning fire. Heavens! Ji Qing felt his scalp tighten. He had never seen old Sis so angry ever. He didn't know which pitiful person had infuriated old Sis. So pitiful. In her anger, old Sis did not recognize anyone. Ji Qing was filled with regret. Why had he been so dumb to stare down the barrel of this gun? Ji Qing knew the time to show his loyalty had come. He pretended to be angry and said, "Sis, don't be so anxious. I'll go send for people. They dare to provoke my sis, they must not want to live." Ji Liu stared at Ji Qing for a while, which caused Ji Qing's hairs to stand up. "All right. Don't act in front of me." Ji Liu snorted coldly and sat down. There was still anger on her face, but she finally calmed down. She propped up her chin, and it was unknown if she was in a daze or considering something. Ji Qing released a deep sigh inside. The most dangerous moment had passed. However, he knew that if he left at this time, he would definitely receive retribution. He carefully and curiously went forward. What happened? Which saint had caused old Sis to be so furious? That skill wasn't just high. Ji Qing was full of admiration towards this unknown expert to the point of kowtowing to his or her skills. Of course, he didn't dare to show any of it on his face. "My charm clothing was defeated," Ji Liu said lightly. Ah! Ji Qing was stunned. He was sincerely concerned now. "Are you wounded?" "No." Ji Qing released a breath but still wasn't able to believe it. "How is it possible? How can charm clothing be defeated? The Ji family's sky clothing was full of transformations and was one of the few remaining earth-level Yao arts in the Yao world. Many of the parts had been previously lost. Afterwards, the Ji family had founded the Sky Clothing Yao Art House. Under accumulation of research and study over years, they finally recovered the original appearance. There were 9 transformations of the Sky Clothing. Charm clothing was one of them. But compared to the Emperor clothing and domination clothing of the Ji family, those that knew the charm clothing were the least common. Of the generations of Ji family disciples, there were rarely those who cultivated the charm clothing. The conditions to cultivate charm clothing were extremely strict. It demanded that the one cultivating it was naturally beautiful with a flawless consciousness, but the most important part was that their heart had to be as clean as jade and untainted. The purer the heart, the stronger the power was in their hands. Even in the Ji family, it was one of the most tightly guarded secrets that Ji Liu had successfully cultivated, charm clothing. There were less than 5 people who knew. The most powerful quality of the charm clothing was that it was intangible and invisible as it affected others. It was one of the best illusory arts. Using the power of the charm clothing, Ji Liu lived a good life. Ever since she was little, she was someone who had always been liked by all. After entering the Yao art house, she became blinding and dazzling. She was the dream lover of countless young and accomplished Yao. The second year she entered the Yao art house, she entered the Genius Alliance and received attention from the leader of the Genius Alliance, Ming Yuyi. The third year, she entered the Genius Alliance Council of Elders and became the youngest elder in the Alliance's history. After becoming the youngest elder of the Genius Alliance, she was appointed by Ming Yuyi as the Relations Minister of the Genius Alliance and was specifically in charge of recruiting talent. She had completely utilized the powers of the charm clothing. These years, she had outstanding results, and her seat as an elder was rock solid. Even as the successor of the Ji family and someone stronger, Ji Qing still lived in her shadow. No one other than Ji Qing, who also cultivated sky clothing, knew how powerful charm clothing was. From a certain perspective, it was a nearly undetectable illusory art, and its effects directly gripped the heart. He had personally seen countless vicious serial killers and mass murders face old sis with a face full of warmth. What kind of monster could bear to attack her? It is that prison-breaking Yao. Ji Liu's expression was slightly ugly. Prison-breaking Yao. Ji Qing stilled and then reacted in a moment. He stammered, the master of the wasteland beast chessboard. Old sis, why did you provoke him? Did Ming Yuyi send you to deal with him? It shouldn't be so. When did it become the elder's turn to attack? Who said we are attacking him? Ji Liu rolled her eyes, and her expression became even uglier. The masses are talking so much about our failures. If the prison-breaking Yao joined the Genius Alliance at this moment, what expression do you think those people would have? Ji Qing pondered it for a while and then nodded. This move is great. Completely pulling the carpet from beneath them. And then? You went to find him. And I had people keeping watch on that little girl called Nanyu. Ji Liu's expression suddenly became black as she gritted. I just spoke, and that guy instantly flipped. Without a word, he used 4 attacks of a very strange Yao art. Attacked without a word? Ji Cheng's expression became slightly strange. Old sis, is this a romantic debt that you left behind in the past? Ji Liu's eyes glared and frightened Ji Qing to shrink his head back into his neck. But he could not bear his own curiosity and said, and then? Nothing. Nothing. Ji Qing was confused. I was directly thrown out of the wasteland beast chessboard. Directly thrown out of the wasteland beast chessboard, Ji Qing stammered and then inhaled sharply. Whoa, this guy was that vicious. The first meeting and he threw old sis out of the wasteland beast chessboard without a word. On pain of his death, Ji Cheng could promise old sis wouldn't easily let this matter go. He carefully asked. Old sis, what are you planning to do now? Humph, this isn't finished. Ji Li spat out with a dark face. In this instant, Ji Cheng was filled with sympathy for that vicious prison-breaking brother. Qinghua Zongshui's body uncontrollably trembled, his teeth were creaking. He was going mad from anger. He had been humiliated. The Blue Flower family had been humiliated. Eating soft rice, no qualifications. The words were like a poisonous snake continuously tearing and consuming his peerlessly proud heart. He suddenly raised his head, those who humiliate me, die. That right now wasn't good. Sun Zhe weakly said. He suddenly remembered who that seductive female Yao was. His heart had almost stopped breathing. He suddenly felt that the decision by the elders was a humongous mistake. Darren's conduct was completely unpredictable. In the blink of an eye, he had offended two big families. The Ji family and Blue Flower family. Heavens! Either of these families could lift a little finger and swept the Grey clan out. He had just watched as Darren had humiliated the two big families. His heart was freezing cold. We need to save time. Suemo said unconcernedly, who has the time to waste on these nobodies? Nobodies, the Ji family and the Blue Flower family were nobodies. Sun Zhe trembled. Just this matter was enough to create a conflict where blood would flow like rivers. He intelligently skipped past this problem. If he let Darren keep talking, the matter would become even worse. He finally understood the meaning of disaster coming from the mouth. Are you the prison-breaking Yao? A weak voice passed over. Why are you guys so irritating? Suemo was completely irritated by these people that constantly interrupted him. He turned around, and swore all over. Ah! The female yelled and retreated 5 steps in fear. When Suemo saw this was just a normal female, his anger instantly dissipated, but his tone was still slightly unfriendly. What is it? You really are the prison-breaking Yao? The little girl gathered her courage and asked. Prison-breaking Yao? If you mean the prison-breaking battle, yes, it's me, said Suemo impatiently. If you have something to say it quickly. Otherwise leave. Seeing that a big transaction was just going to be completed but being successively interrupted by others, Suemo's mood could be imagined. Wow! Great! The little girl was so excited she almost jumped up. I am a reporter for the Tomorrow Yao channel, can I interview you? Interview? Suemo stilled. He thought about it and then said openly. No problem, but you have to pay. Just a reminder, GE's price is very high. The little girl immediately turned to stone. Zhangzhe and Nan Yu covered their faces and could not bear to watch. Chapter 369, I am Xiaomo Gu. In the end, the one that accepted the fee was Nan Yu. Suemo wasn't willing to hand over the fee from the bottom of his heart, but this was not something that could be avoided. As for the price, he doubled the amount that Zhangzhe suggested. When the little girl heard this price, her expression changed. When she asked her superior, her voice had been trembling. The interview quickly proceeded. After getting the fee, Suemo was very professional. But as the interview continued, Nan Yu and Zhangzhe's expressions became increasingly ugly. In the end, their faces were ashen white and wore expressions of terror. The little girl gaped with wide eyes in shock, but she quickly became excited. Heavens! The interview this time would definitely sell. After the interview, the little girl hurriedly left. Watching as the little girl left, Nan Yu and Zhangzhe wanted to speak when Suemo suddenly disappeared with a sound, his time was up. Nan Yu and Zhangzhe looked at the dissipating white light with dazed expressions. A beat later, Zhangzhe said with exasperation, it's big trouble this time. Nan Yu knew what Xianxia was saying. She remained silent. Even though her heart was filled with worry, she made a resolution that she wouldn't be moved no matter what hardships Darren encountered. As Darren's follower, any wavering, even if it was wavering of the heart, was shameful. Darren, you created great trouble this time. Suemo had a down expression. After this group of people interrupting today, we didn't even finish discussing the matters at hand. Pu Yao looked at Suemo with extreme displeasure. But after considering he had to rely on Suemo to get the golden souls, he decided to keep quiet. Just at this time, he heard Zhong Ru's voice come from the outside. Darren. Come in, come in. Suemo felt slightly puzzled as he could hear the urgency in Zhong Ru's voice. Zhong Ru wasn't like some Qinghua Zhang Shui, he was mentally strong. A Diana Xiu that was raised outside a sect and could still cultivate an abhina, that wasn't something any average person could accomplish. Zhong Ru had someone else with him. It was the guy that Xixiang had been carrying the other day. Darren, this Xixiang is a high-ranked disciple of Great Buddha Temple. Zhong Ru first introduced Yizheng. Great Buddha Temple. In the sea of consciousness, Pu Yao shrieked and then gritted, no wonder this person has a smell I dislike. Great Buddha Temple. Great Buddha Temple. So Great Buddha Temple had not been destroyed yet. Suemo jumped in fright at Pu Yao's shriek and fury. It was the first time he had seen Pu Yao lose his composure so. He carefully asked, you had encounters? Humph. A cold snort. Pu Yao suddenly calmed down, but his bloody pupil dimmed and brightened in turn. The killing energy around his body was also uncertain. Zhong Ru saw Suemo did not react and continued, Yizheng Xixiang said that he may know what place this is. Suemo's attention came back at the mention of this. He was slightly shocked. Ah, what place is this? Yizheng was studying Suemo all this time. It was the first time that he had seen the boss of this strange troop. The person in front of him was clearly younger than himself. When he first encountered Wei Sheng, he had been astounded by Wei Sheng's age, but seeing an even younger Suemo, there was only one phrase in his mind. Only freaks thrived. Yizheng reflected inside, but he did not dare to slight the other because of his age. The power the other controlled was enough to easily crush him a few hundred times over. He hurried to say respectfully, this little monk is just guessing and is not sure. This little monk has frequently read my Xixiang's various records, and happened to come across a vague reference. It referred to something called the Battle of Sealed Extinction. Supposedly, it occurred about 20,000 years ago. This little monk once felt that the description was absurd and skimmed past the notes, but thinking about it now, the description seems similar. Battle of Sealed Extinction. In the sea of consciousness, Pu Yao's body shook suddenly. This little monk Xixiang likes and collects all kinds of wondrous legends and tales. This little monk was influenced and has read about many such tales. What this little monk was initially interested in was the great battle from 3,000 years ago. Later, this little monk found that there were several separate references to battles in these legends. One was 3,000 years ago, one was 10,000 years ago. These are the two most common references. Naturally, nothing needs to be said about the great battle 3,000 years ago. But starting from 3,000 years ago to 10,000 years ago, there were numerous legends and rumors about that period, but if we go back even further, there are a few rare records. Of those battles only one could be called a great battle, the Battle of Sealed Extinction that occurred 20,000 years ago. This battle is so ancient that the only obscure mentions are in Xixiang's collection of anecdotes and fantasy stories. Yizheng's words flowed. He knew this was the time to display his value. He could not fail. He furiously tried to think back to the folk tales and anecdotes that he had read at Xixiang's place. Even though the Battle of Seal Extinction is rarely mentioned, but those tales all say that the mountains and rivers changed color, the sky and earth completely red, and the land was blanketed with corpses. A great battle 20,000 years ago. Xuemo gaped upon hearing this, like he was listening to a story. Not just 20,000 years ago, but Xuemo even felt the battle 3,000 years ago was like a distant rumor. 20,000 years ago, how ancient would that be? Were there even Xianxia at that time? Even though Xuemo seemed to be listening to the story, he was secretly paying attention to Pu Yao's reaction. Pu Yao had been silent, and seemed to be thinking of something. This caused Xuemo to feel that Yizheng's suggestion was not nonsense. Yizheng wanted to perform well from the bottom of his heart. But other than the time period of when the battle occurred, he did not know anything else about the battle of sealed extinction. He couldn't help but be upset with himself. If he knew before what he did now, he should have studied Xixiang's books. Just as Yizheng was panicking, he suddenly heard Xuemo asked, "Is Master Dezheng still alive?" Yizheng stilled and his expression was slightly strange. The ancestral master passed away the 8th year after the war. In Xuemo's sea of consciousness, a sigh suddenly sounded. The viciousness on Pu Yao's face dissipated to only leave behind a thick aura of loneliness. He turned around and silently stared at the gravestone. He lightly murmured, "You are dead, they are also dead, only I am still alive." Just having bid farewell to Yizheng, Xuemo entered the sea of consciousness and saw this. He perceptively closed his mouth. Just as he prepared to leave the sea of consciousness, he was called by Pu Yao. The battle of sealed extinction that he just mentioned is very plausible. Pu Yao turned around, his expression normal. There were no hints on his face as though what had just happened was Xuemo's delusion. He said calmly, "The battle of sealed extinction is too ancient. Even I did not think of it. I know very little about this great battle. We need to research information about it." "How?" Xuemo asked, bewildered. They were in the fiendish mist, and lacked communication with the outside world. How could they research anything? "You forgot the 10-finger prison," Pu Yao said faintly. Xuemo stilled and then instantly reacted. His eyes lit up. Their biggest problem now was that they lacked a method of communication with the outside world, and they were trapped in this mysterious ancient battlefield. If they could contact the outside, then they could receive help. The help they needed the most was general information. If they knew the general location of this ancient battlefield, Xuemo would be even able to use transportation formations to take everyone and leave this ghastly place. They had entered this place through a transportation formation, then they were definitely able to leave this place through a transportation formation. However, there was a prerequisite. He needed to know the general location of where they were now. Otherwise, if he was careless and transported everyone into chaotic turbulence, that was seeking death. Xuemo's eyes brightened. He felt he had been a headless chicken before, running around in this fiendish mist in search of that chance that only existed in theory. But it was different now. They didn't just have a clue. If they could find the path, the hope that they could walk out of this ghastly place would increase. Xuemo wanted to rush into the 10-finger prison. This was the first time he desired to enter the 10-finger prison so much. Of course, this was just an impulse. He had to let his consciousness recover to its best state before he could re-enter the wasteland beast chessboard again. However, there was still something he was puzzled by. If this really was the battlefield of the Battle of Sealed Extinction, then how did Xixiang and Yizheng get here? This is Tomorrow Yao channel. Right now, we are broadcasting an exclusive interview that we have just finished recording. The interviewee is the prison-breaking Yao that just completed the prison-breaking battle. To get this interview, we went through great. Nanyu and Xianxia looked at the news that the Tomorrow Yao channel were broadcasting and both of them had ugly expressions. "This is somewhat embarrassing," Xianxia gave a long sigh. Nanyu kept her jaw clenched and did not make a sound. However, the expression on her face seemed to be that of a devoted martyr. The little girl appeared on the news. She seemed slightly nervous. The public has been constantly speculating to your name, can you introduce yourself to everyone? Zhuo Mo's behavior was very normal and did not have any of the nervousness of being interviewed for the first time. Hello everyone, I am Xiao Mo Gu. Xiao Mo Gu. Such a strange name. The little girl quickly memorized it. She quickly asked the second question, why did you call the first prison the Wasteland Beast chessboard? Don't you feel that it is like a chessboard? Zhuo Mo asked in response with a puzzled expression. What is a wasteland beast? A wasteland beast is a wasteland beast. Mr. Xiao Mo Gu, can you speak about the conflict between you and the Genius Alliance? The little girl asked as she led the conversation, with malicious intent. I don't know them, Zhuo Mo obediently replied. Ah, Mr. Xiao Mo Gu has never heard of the Genius Alliance. The little girl purposefully misinterpreted Zhuo Mo's meaning. Heard of them, Zhuo Mo continued to obediently answer, just now. Nan Yu and Sang Zei's expressions were very terrible. Even though they already knew the content beforehand, but seeing it again, their scalp still felt numb. Is this your plan to retaliate against them? The little girl cunningly asked. Retaliation? Why do I have to retaliate? Zhuo Mo asked curiously. The Genius Alliance is currently challenging your Wasteland Beast chessboard. The little girl had a matter-of-fact expression. Can I charge fees? Fees? The little girl had an astonished expression. According to the number of times, challenge once, pay a fee, very fair. Zhuo Mo felt his idea was great. The little girl's face was exasperated. She forcibly suppressed it. Are you going to accept challenges from the Genius Alliance? What I mean are individual challenges. No. Zhuo Mo shook his head. Why not? There is no money to be made. Don't you feel this is ruining your prestige? Prestige? I have a lot of prestige. Zhuo Mo asked back. Hem. The little girl almost choked. If they are willing to pay. There are idiots like that. Zhuo Mo was very shocked. Then he thought and said with some reluctance, if they are willing to pay, then I can consider it. What is your price? The little girl continued to ask. Zhuo Mo pulled Sang Zei over. Talk to him. When Sang Zei saw this part, he wanted to find a hole in the ground and burrow into it. Nan Yu looked sympathetically at Sang Zei, while rejoicing inside that Darren knew she had been impoverished from youth, and was not skilled in bargaining and negotiating. Otherwise, this would be really embarrassing. Is any Yao allowed? The little girl continued to ask. No female Yao, Zhuo Mo said resolutely. Why? The little girl asked curiously. Today, I encountered one mole. She had a mole by her mouth. Oh. When one mole saw me, she immediately used an illusory art on me. Zhuo Mo recalled the restless and heated feeling inside his body and was instantly angry. It was lucky that I reacted fast, and attacked back without a word. We carried out a thorough investigation into this event, Xiao Mo Gu mentioned. According to bystanders, the one mole that Mr. Xiao Mo Gu saw is very likely to be Miss Ji Liu. Later, we offered a great reward and found a Yao recording art from a bystander that recorded this scene. Other than this, we also unexpectedly found Mr. Qinghua Zhang Shui was also present. He seemed to have been forced out of the Wasteland Beast chessboard by Mr. Xiao Mo Gu as well, but we did not find any signs that Mr. Xiao Mo Gu used a Yao art. Experts speculate that Mr. Qinghua Zhang Shui was attacked by a mysterious Yao art, which destabilized his mind, and he was forced to leave the Wasteland Beast chessboard. Both Miss Ji Liu and Mr. Qinghua Zhang Shui belong to the Genius Alliance, and Miss Ji Liu is also one of the elders of the Genius Alliance. This incident means that the conflict between the two sides has escalated. The host Yao quickly spat out this string of words in an excited tone. He was very clear. An enormous storm was formally beginning. Chapter 370, Jade Pendants. Wei Mo told Wei Xing about Yi Zhang's hypothesis. Wei Xing made a sound. Does Shidi still remember the sword cave? Of course I remember. Wei Mo nodded. He did not dare to mention that he had explored that place many times. I was transported from there. Wei Xing said, there is a person called Lin Qian that has been investigating you all this time. This time, they found that the Yao military had taken over our Wukong mountain, and thought that the matter was connected to you. They persuaded the sect leader to allow them into the sword cave. I accompanied them in. Later, in the deepest level of the sword cave, I found a place that was unique. Wei's words made Wei Mo jump in fright. He urgently asked, wait, you say he's called Lin Qian? Yes, Shidi knows him. Wei Xing described Lin Qian's appearance and then gravely said, Shidi needs to be very careful of this person. This man's background is very high and strong. The Xiuzha under his command are all elite. He led just 100 people, but I wasn't even a match for a normal guard. Wei Xing only needed to slightly describe him, and Wei Mo knew that the Lin Qian Xixiang spoke about was the same Lin Qian that he had met. Thinking about it now, it may not have been a coincidence that he had encountered Lin Qian at that time. He thought it was very unlucky. He had been very careful, but people still locked onto him. Of course, it was just a shock. Right now, they were in the ancient battlefield. Even if Lin Qian had enormously powerful backing, this place had no connection to him. However, he had to be careful when they left. He knew how powerful eldest Xixiang was. Even though eldest Xixiang had not been Jindan then, but his combat abilities could not be underestimated. If even a normal guard was stronger than eldest Xixiang, then what level would that troop be? Seeing Wei Mo was listening carefully, Wei Xing narrated everything that he knew. Wei Mo generally understood the problem of Lin Qian, but there were some words that could not be said and could only be left to rot inside. His attention quickly moved away from Lin Qian. If they could not find a path of exit, even if Lin Qian did not attack, they would not survive. The urgent matter now was to leave this place as soon as possible. After Wei Mo mentioned it, Wei Xing suddenly remembered the jade pendant remnant. Right, Ancestral Master mentioned that the transportation formation had been comprehended from this talisman. Is there a clue here? Wei Mo took the jade pendant. The jade pendant was very old and had a broken corner. At a glance, it was possible to see this was a relic that had lasted through ages. Wei Mo was very curious about an object of the Ancestral Master. He suddenly made a light sound, there's something strange. Pu Yao in the Sea of Consciousness made a light sound at the same time. There is something strange. The person and Yao spoke together. What is strange? Wei Xing hurriedly asked. Wei Mo did not speak. He closed his eyes, and his consciousness wrapped around this jade pendant like it was the tide. Wei Xing's expression shifted. Shidi's consciousness was so strong. Was Shidi planning to walk the path of the Diana Shio? He then recalled Shidi's preference for formations, and then felt he could be a Seal Shio. Diana Shio and Seal Shio both emphasized the training of the consciousness, but they did so in completely opposite directions. The Diana Shio's consciousness was to be clear and steady, vast and peaceful, while the consciousness of a Seal Shio was the path of transformation and cooperation. Wei Xing was shocked. Shidi's consciousness was far stronger than those Diana and Formation Shio that he had seen before. It reached an almost fantastical level. He imperceptibly furrowed his brows. He knew the consciousness was good. Even as a sword Shio, if he could cultivate the consciousness at the same time, it would be of great aid. Shidi's consciousness was stronger, but it made a person feel it was too unrooted. No matter if it was Diana Shio or Formation Shio, they all emphasized the consciousness, but in the end, their foundation was based on Ling power. Without Ling power, no matter how strong the consciousness was, it was like a person with a weak body, and they were unable to wave the sharp heavy axe. Had a problem occurred to Shidi's cultivation? Wei Xing was puzzled, but he did not speak. Shidi always had his own definite opinions. Even early on at Wukong Mountain, everyone's cultivation path had been different. Thinking about the time at Wukong Mountain, he couldn't help but shake his head and smile. He really was worrying for nothing. With Shidi's practical personality, even on pain of death, he wouldn't cultivate a useless technique. Also, Shidi was usually very strange, and liked to work on those weird and wondrous things. Has Shidi found something? Wei Xing asked. Zhuo Mo's expression was strange. It seems that the ancestral master of ours isn't some normal person. This jade pendant's origins is most likely extraordinary. The presence on it is very strange and I have never seen it before. Wei Xing smiled slightly and was not too shocked. In his view, he and Shidi were both too young and their knowledge was limited. It was normal for them to not have seen or heard of something. If they had seen it before, then it would be abnormal. What he did not know was that there was an old Yao thousands of years old in Zhuo Mo's sea of consciousness. Zhuo Mo almost never saw a shocked expression on Pu Yao's face. This was the first time. Usually, Pu Yao loved to act as though he was the greatest Yao in the world. It was rare for his expression to shift and show surprise. What did you find? Zhuo Mo was curious as his eyes widened. Powerful. Opening his eye, Pu Yao released a long sigh, and the shock on his face did not retreat. The presence on the jade pendant was left behind 20,000 years ago. 20,000 years ago, Zhuo Mo felt his tongue was knotted as he stammered the question. 20,000 years. After 20,000 years, even the most powerful Xiuzhe and Yaomua would have turned to dust, and dissipated without a trace. On the battlefield they were in, the piles of corpses had weathered and would turn to dust at a touch. There was someone that could make a presence remain for 20,000 years, what kind of power would that take? The person and Yao were immersed in enormous shock and unable to pull themselves out. A long while later, Zhuo Mo heard Pu Yao sigh. Compared to them, we are insignificant. With Pu Yao's egotistic personality, for him to say such a thing, it was clear just how enormous the blow that the jade pendant had caused. Zhuo Mo didn't know what to say. 20,000 years, it really was. He could not find the words to describe his mood right now. After a while, he woodenly left the sea of consciousness and said to Wei Xing, eldest Xixiang, I'm going to study this jade pendant for a while. Just take it. Wei Xing nodded. In the field of studying strange and weird objects, he could not compare to Shidi. Wei Xing did not idle around. There was an endless amount of people asking him for guidance, all of them were members of the Vermilion Bird Camp. Vermilion Bird Camp's daily cultivation was primarily in two areas. One was individual cultivation, the other was battle tactics. In the area of battle tactics, there was guidance from Gong Sun Cha and they progressed smoothly, but their individual cultivation was problematic. Most of them had come from grassroots and had never received a complete and proper education. What Zhuo Mo was able to provide them were numerous kinds of sword scriptures and sword formations. But just the sword scriptures were not enough. No one could guide them through the problems they encountered in their daily cultivation. They could only rely on their own explorations. The sword formation was only useful for those sword xiu who had a firm foundation such as Ma Fan. Wei Xing's arrival caused the people of Vermilion Bird Camp that had been wandering in the dark to see light. The worldly apparition that day had been deeply branded into their minds. Just this was enough to make them feel admiration and respect, but many people still had doubts. People that were skilled in cultivation were not necessarily good at teaching. Even more, what reason did Wei Xing have for teaching them? So everyone thought of testing the waters and had Xia Shan go first to investigate. Xia Shan clearly understood everyone's worries. He did manage to enter Jindan, but this was the result of a long period accumulation. In other words, he had used the stupidest method possible to break through to Jindan. There was pitifully little he could teach the others. He was also curious just how powerful a genius that could cause a worldly apparition was. He agreed and ran over to ask aid from Wei Sheng. When a professional reached out, it was possible to see if they had the ability or not. Wei Sheng did not withhold any advice. Just a few words, and Xia Shan had such admiration he could kowtow. After going back, Xia Shan greatly advertised how powerful Wei Sheng was. As expected of Darren's eldest Shixiang, the two were generous, did not hide anything, were just the same etc. etc. This time, all the sword Xiao of Vermilion Bird Camp could not sit still. But to avoid irritating Wei Sheng, the camp used the method of drawing straws to establish an order to ask guidance. This move instantly was effective. To pursue the sword path, Wei Sheng had gone through thousands of hardships, and almost lost his life multiple times. After becoming an inner sect disciple, the one that taught him the sword was Xian Yan, the one in Wukong sword sect most skilled in sword essence, in addition to the fact that Wei Sheng was frighteningly hard-working. Due to this, his foundation was extremely secure. After receiving the complete, void sword scripture, his breadth of knowledge was much stronger than normal sword Xiao. His early experiences taught him the pain of not having someone to ask for guidance. These sword Xiao were also Shidi's subordinates. This could be considered helping Shidi out. So when the sword Xiao of Vermilion Bird Camp came over to ask for his guidance, he easily agreed. Wei Sheng quickly found that the problems many people encountered were very similar. When he mentioned this to Zhua Mo, and Zhua Mo's eyes turned and thought of a great solution. Open a lecture hall. Before, at Wukong Mountain, there would be inner sect disciples that would come at regular intervals to teach outer sect disciples. Wei Sheng felt that this method was pretty good and followed it. The sword teaching hall opened in this fiendish mist. After having this idea, Zhua Mo instantly went into the 10-finger prison. Entering the wasteland beast chessboard again, Zhua Mo's mentality had completely changed. Before, he had treated it as if he was playing a game, but now that the 10-finger prison was connected to whether or not they could escape, he could not be as reckless as before. He desperately desired any information about the Battle of Sealed Extinction. This desire surpassed his thirst for golden souls. He didn't know how to use the 10-finger prison to get information about the Battle of Sealed Extinction, but still he stepped into the wasteland beast chessboard. When the light faded, when the chessboard was laid out, he inhaled deeply. A new battlefield, a new battle. Start. Chapter 371, Bounty Nan Yu was not here, Sang Zhe was also not here, Zhua Mo was slightly disappointed. He had originally wanted to ask them if there were any methods to research information about the Battle of Sealed Extinction. Since the two were actual Yao, they would be more familiar with Yao society. Pu Yao was a true-blooded Yao, but after 3,000 years, he also didn't know anything about what the present Yao world was like. He dared to humiliate Miss Ji Liu. He cannot be forgiven. This person is too hateful. Yes. Who cares about the Genius Alliance, but he dares call her one mole. Darn it, if I find him, I'll definitely have a good chat with him. We aren't a match for him, we cannot just sit back because we are not a match. We need to make him understand offending Miss Ji Liu means offending us. If he offends us, we won't let him have good days. Brother Wang, do you have some good ideas? Tell us. Ha, those garbage scum from the Genius Alliance, they cannot even protect Miss Ji Liu's reputation. We cannot rely on them. We need to rely on our own power and fight on behalf of Miss Ji Liu. Of course we are not a match for Xiao Mo Gu, but there naturally are those who are a match. We'll put out a bounty. Bounty? Yes. There are many people like us who are protectors of Miss Ji Liu. Even though our individual powers are weak, but if we gather together, we can definitely let Xiao Mo go have a taste of our power. I've taken out all my allowance money for the last half year to place a bounty out for a powerful expert to deal with him. Brother Wang, this bit of money isn't enough. Of course it is not enough. I don't know who had the idea, but they opened a bounty in the Yao market to deal with Xiao Mo Gu and allows adding to the bounty. The money inside has already reached 2 million. 2 million. Heavens! Xiao Mo Gu is in for a tragically bad time. This is just here. Supposedly, there is a bounty in every city. Xiao Mo Gu will quickly know the power of Miss Ji. This idea is too clever. I'll go immediately. For Miss Ji, I'll take out my allowance for this whole year. Zhuo Mo's face was flabbergasted where he stood. No way, had he poked the hornet's nest. One mole shouldn't be this powerful. Wailing inside, Zhuo Mo even wanted to cry. If this was in the past, he would dust off his "but, Ji won't play with you anymore," and leave. What of Ji Liu? What of Qinghua Zongshui? They would only get to stare. He had just prepared to think of the 10-finger prison as a new battlefield and suddenly found that the battlefield was now filled with his enemies. Heavens, don't play people like this. Pu Yao, are there any methods of changing my appearance? Zhuo Mo hurriedly asked. Starting from the 5th prison one can change their appearance, but it is not possible in the first 4 prisons. Pu Yao's answer mercilessly killed Zhuo Mo's last hope. Zhuo Mo's eyes flickered around like he was a thief. Good, maybe they only know the name of Xiao Mo Gu and not his appearance. Just at this moment, a light suddenly flashed nearby and a little Yao appeared. The little Yao saw Zhuo Mo and was dazed. Zhuo Mo saw the other's expression and thought, oh. Xiao Mo Gu. The little Yao shouted furiously and pointed at Zhuo Mo with a finger. Whoosh, all the noise disappeared. The surroundings were silent. Zhuo Mo could feel many eyes landing on his body. Even though he had seen grand scenes before, Zhuo Mo's scalp turned numb and he felt uncomfortable. Now that he was in this situation, Zhuo Mo could only force himself to continue. He pretended to be calm and glanced at the other before moving his gaze aside. He walked forward and had every intention of ignoring the other. The little Yao reacted, and his face turned pale. He felt regretful. Why had he been so reckless and shouted? Free combat was allowed inside the 10-finger prison. Even though it would not be deadly as in reality, but consciousness injuries could not be voided. In the past, there were those that had been too heavily wounded in the 10-finger prison that it had caused their consciousness to weaken 2 stages. After that, incidents of fighting in the 10-finger prison quickly decreased. Later, everyone found that it wasn't just fighting that could create injuries. Even being in the prison battlefield could cause people to be wounded spiritually. If the consciousness was wounded, they could not avoid experiencing the pain involved. Under so many eyes, Zhuo Mo turned into light and left the wasteland beast chessboard. Ha 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 ha. Pu Yao's explosion of laughter spread out far into the sea of consciousness. He pointed at Zhuo Mo without any composure, one hand on his stomach, as he laughed without restraint. Zhuo Mo's face was as black as a pot, his tone unfriendly. Laughing? What is laughable? Ha 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 ha. Pu Yao did not have any intentions of restraining himself and laughed even more outrageously. I'm going to die from laughter. Street rat, you are a literal street rat right now. Already very discontent, Zhuo Mo's discontent increased because of Pu Yao's laughter. His stubbornness rose. Wasn't it just the 10-finger prison? He wasn't afraid of anyone. He wanted to see what kinds of people had come. Zhuo Mo's mood was vicious and murderous as he entered the wasteland beast chessboard again. The scenery in front of him changed as he re-entered the wasteland beast chessboard. When he saw the surroundings clearly, his heart was reassured. Good. The position when he entered the wasteland beast chessboard each time was different. This was very advantageous for him. At the least, if he couldn't win, he could run. With a trick up his sleeve, Xuemo wasn't panicked anymore. He started to think about the influence this incident would have on him. He had had a very casual attitude about what had happened before, and did not treat the incident seriously. Now that the situation was different, his demands were also different. The incident of one mole seemed to be pretty big. After experiencing so much, Xuemo was clear that making a big fuss had its own advantages, like becoming famous faster. When he had successfully completed the prison-breaking battle, people had come to recruit him. What he needed was information on the Battle of Sealed Extinction. Truthfully, Xuemo had no hopes that this would be easy. This was something that even Pu Yao was not clear about. It was a question even if the Yao world still had information on the topic. Even if there was information on it, it definitely would not be so easy to access. Nan Yu was a normal little Yao. The Wisteria clan of the South Sky had been in decline for too long. Zhangzai's situation was better than Nan Yu, but that was just by a little bit. Xuemo had a feeling that investigating the Battle of Sealed Extinction was probably not an easy task. If he needed to use large amounts of resources, it would not be possible to realize it with the two of them. The spiritual imprint on his arm shifted. Nan Yu and Zhangzai had come. Xuemo put a thought and passed it through the spiritual imprint on his arm. Moments later, the two arrived. Darren. The two hurriedly bowed. Humph, is there a quiet place? Xuemo really felt that there were too many people around. Zhangzai was the first to react and hurriedly said, Darren only needs to put down an illusory formation. Xuemo wanted to facepalm. He was so dumb, unable to even think of such a simple solution. It really was an easy matter for him to put down an illusory formation. His right hand rose slightly. A light energy left his hand and landed on the ground. A thin circular curtain of light rose around them and surrounded them. Zhangzai knew when things were good. Darren's formation building methods were very powerful. His admiration rose. Darren was not old, but he seemed to be able to do anything, and was skilled in all of them. Nan Yu's thoughts were much simpler. She looked curiously at the curtain of light. Darren, what illusory formation is this? Little cover-up, a variant of a water Yao art. Water can create illusions, refract light, and is very suitable for setting up illusory formations. Xuemo explained as they moved inside the curtain. Zhangzai looked with admiration at Nan Yu. Nan Yu and Darren's relationship was clearly unordinary. It seemed that Nan Yu was Darren's follower. If she was his student, she would not call him Darren, and would call him teacher. Darren still treated Nan Yu as though she was a student, and did not seem like he was interacting with a follower. It was rare to see a Darren that were like this. Nan Yu was very fortunate. After Xuemo finished his pointer, he asked, what is Ji Li Yu's background? Nan Yu and Zhangzai's expressions were slightly strange. Darren, you finally thought of asking about this now? Zhangzai knew that Nan Yu definitely did not know as many details as he did and said proactively, Darren, Ji Li Yu is the woman you threw out last time. I know. Xuemo said expressionlessly. She is the eldest granddaughter of the Ji family leader, and is loved by all the elders in the sect. She was very outstanding from youth, and it really was that everyone who saw her was in love with her. The second year after entering the Yao art house, she and her younger brother, Ji Cheng, were invited into the Genius Alliance at the same time. Her rise inside the Genius Alliance is much faster than Ji Cheng. She quickly entered the Council of Elders and is the youngest elder on the Council of the Genius Alliance. Genius Alliance again? Xuemo's brow furrowed slightly. Continue. Ji Liu might not be the next successor to the Ji family, but she is the most famous Yao of the Ji family. Even the Ji clan elder is not as well known as she is. Ji Liu might come from the Ji family, but she is not interested in cultivating Yao arts, and studies dancing, singing, and the instruments. She is especially skilled in singing. The sound is enchanting and well-liked by the public. She has many defenders. Zhangzhe paused, and then emphasized, many. After listening to Zhangzhe's introduction, Xuemo instantly felt it was problematic to have offended such a powerful person. However, Xuemo just felt it was troublesome. His attention was still primarily on the Battle of Sealed Extinction. Have you heard of the Battle of Sealed Extinction? Xuemo suddenly asked. Battle of Sealed Extinction, what is that? Nan Yu asked curiously. Zhangzhe shook his head. No. Just as Xuemo had thought. He mused and then said, I need to research some information about an ancient battle, do you have any suggestions? Will the records room of our Yao Art House have it? Nan Yu said. Zhangzhe said, if the information Darren is searching for is very rare and obscure, there are some places to try. Xuemo's eyes lit up. Speak. The first is the Yao Art House that Nan Yu just mentioned. Each Yao Art House has records rooms, and the scale of the records rooms of those large Yao Art Houses are extremely astonishing, and have complete information in all areas. The second is some special little circles. Each profession will have their own little circles. They would have information exchanges at regular intervals. The third is the simplest, a bounty. Bounty? Xuemo's eyes gradually became bright. Chapter 372 Golden Soul, yes, Darren. Zhangzhe had started to become familiar with Xuemo's temperament. This is the most convenient and most plausible solution. The information that Darren needs is most likely uncommon, and we aren't familiar with this area at all. Since this is the case, we can give the task to a professional Yao to do. We only need to supply an appropriate price, one that will move their hearts, and they will definitely try their best to find the information that Darren wants. Xuemo was persuaded by Zhangzhe's suggestion. Where do I have to go to put a bounty? You can go to the Yao market, but if it is a more difficult bounty, you will have to go to the Yao markets of bigger cities, Zhangzhe said. Then you can find the biggest city for me. I'll provide the money, Xuemo said without hesitation. Zhangzhe instantly had an expression of difficulty. There is a problem. Xuemo asked with puzzlement. Darren might not know, but there are access requirements to go to these large cities. My Yao designation level is not high, and so I cannot, Zhangzhe thought inside, how could Darren not know even this? Was Darren a hidden Yao that lived in the deep forests? Yao designation level. What is that? Xuemo did not understand. As expected. Zhangzhe was even more sure of his speculation. No wonder Darren's conduct was so unique. He impatiently explained, Darren, the Yao designation is an imprint that signals each Yao's identity. Every city usually has a big formation. If one cannot reach a certain cultivation, they are unable to enter. The more prosperous the city, the higher the Yao designation level needed. Xuemo became very interested, then wouldn't one city all be experts? They would have to have people to do labor, or do they do everything on their own? These doorways are just directed to the Yao that come and go. The locals can enter and leave as they will. The locals of these places usually have low cultivation, and their Yao designation is another kind. The management of local Yao designations is extremely strict and unable to be faked. This troublesome. Xuemo felt the problem was somewhat difficult and asked, then how does one increase their Yao designation level? There are many ways. Like a certification of power. With Darren's strength, you only need to go to the Yao designation ministry, and get an examination of power to get a pretty good Yao designation level. Other than this, you can increase your contribution. Every city has their needs. If you can provide what they need, one can receive an appropriate contribution credit. When contribution credits reach a certain number, one can receive access permissions. Suemo said, "It's not convenient for me to go. Can I hire a Yao with a high Yao designation level to go? It is probably very difficult." Zhangzhe shook his head and said, "Yao of high designation levels basically will go to live in the bigger cities. The bigger the city, the better the environment. Like Wind Creek Pond, Victory Mountain, they are all famous holy cultivation grounds. Even if the living in the cities is hard, they would not want to come back because the rate of cultivation progress is higher in those places." "What is your Yao designation level?" Suemo asked. "Second." Zhangzhe was slightly embarrassed. Suemo turned around to ask Nanyu. "You? Second?" Nanyu was very open. "How many levels in total?" 24. Zhangzhe thought and then said, "Darren, maybe you can go to the higher prisons to look. Supposedly, there are also places in there that are like Yao markets. One of my cousins once went to the third prison and mentioned this to me." Suemo nodded. He said, "From today, I will start passing on gray scar art to you." "Thank you, Darren." Zhangzhe suddenly became excited. He suddenly lifted and opened his palm. A golden ball of light appeared in his palm. He respectfully presented it. "This little one's consciousness is too weak, and can only bring one golden soul every time. In the future, this little one will bring a golden soul each time. This is the golden soul." Suemo took over the golden soul curiously. It looked like a golden cloud the size of a palm. It was insubstantially light in his hand. Like it was alive, it was slightly rippling. Suemo could feel a strong presence of vitality. Suddenly, deep and raw ancient words came from Suemo's mouth. No matter how hard Nanyu and Zhangzhe tried to listen, they could not hear it clearly. It was so blurry like it came from the depths of the earth. With speed visible to the naked eye, the cloud turned to a puddle of golden water. The presence of life suddenly became exponentially stronger. Bam! The golden water suddenly exploded and turned into a handful of golden mist. Amidst the deep and indistinct chant, the golden mist silently surrounded Suemo. It was like moisture permeating long-parched sand and quickly entered the body constructed of Suemo's consciousness without leaving a drop behind. In Suemo's sea of consciousness, Pu Yao's body was covered by a layer of faint golden light. He was sitting cross-legged with a solemn expression. A powerful presence of vitality filled every corner of the sea of consciousness. The presents that spilled out were all absorbed by Suemo's sea of consciousness. Suemo felt unspeakably refreshed. "This is really good," Suemo said with lingering hunger. He looked at Pu Yao in meditation and couldn't help but smile. This guy was so urgent and impatient. It seemed that the golden soul was very important to him. He did not disturb Pu Yao and retreated from the sea of consciousness. Zhangzhe was increasingly respectful. He did not understand the deep and indistinct chant that Suemo had just said, but it made him think of some things that grandfather had said to him on accident. The Grey clan had guarded its golden tree for more than 3,000 years, and their understanding of the golden soul was much deeper than any other Yao. Zhangzhe knew of all kinds of legends about the golden soul. The method Darren used to absorb the golden soul was completely different than any passed down through the clan. Cultivating in the deep forests, possessing an inheritance from the ancient ages. Zhangzhe gradually drew out Suemo's identity in his mind. Just as Zhangzhe was thinking nonsense, Suemo turned and asked Nanyu, "How have you been recently?" "I've solved the 6th problem." Nanyu seriously replied. Pretty good progress." Suemo was slightly shocked. Nan Yu's rate of improvement was faster than he had imagined. It seemed that the little girl worked pretty hard during this time. What he did not know was that Nan Yu cultivated with an attitude of putting her life on the line. She had securely remembered Zhuo Mo's reprimand from last time. She cultivated day and night and spent any free time on cultivation. Her fundamentals could not be said to be good, and her talent was not outstanding, but she was the first to come into contact with Zhuo Mo's way of thinking. In reality, when the prison-breaking 6 problems had spread, she had also tried to solve them. Compared to other Yao, she had received Zhuo Mo's thinking, and it naturally was easier for her to solve them. She quickly solved up to the 4th problem, but she became stuck. Her weak foundation stopped her from moving forward. Nan Yu was not stupid and instantly realized this. She recalled a dumb method that Darren had mentioned to her: deconstruct all the Yao arts she encountered on the path. She really ran into the wasteland beast chessboard, and following the chessboard, she deconstructed tile by tile. Deconstruction of the chessboard, forced to leave, recover her spiritual power, and enter the chessboard again to deconstruct. She repeated this. She did not dare to relax one bit. Every time she thought about giving up, she told herself that this was her only chance. When Zhuo Mo finished listening to Nan Yu narrate her daily cultivation, looking at Nan Yu's focused face, the admiration in his eyes increased. At the side, Zhang also had admiration on his face. He had personally seen how crazy Nan Yu had been. Everyone was about the same in age, but this persistence was enough to make him embarrassed. Zhuo Mo motivated Nan Yu. This method might be dumb, but it once produced a Sky Yao. Zhang Zai's heart shook. There was a lot of room to ponder behind Darren's words. Nan Yu did not think much and nodded seriously. The foundations are a matter of practicing. Persisting has great benefits. Zhuo Mo then said, from today, you can start learning South Sky Arrow art. Do not slack off. Yes, Darren. Nan Yu said with the same seriousness. Zhuo Mo started to pass the 2 Yao arts. After asking for Zhuo Mo's permission, Zhang Zai released a recording Yao art in case he could not remember it all. Then he would become the criminal of his clan. After hearing just a few sentences, he could not control himself, and almost cried. Grey Scar art. Lost for 3,000 years, Grey Scar art was going to see the light of day again. Compared to Zhang Zai's excitement, Nan Yu was much more peaceful. The Wisteria clan of the South Sky was far too distant for her. She only hoped that she could reach Darren's requirements to be able to follow Darren and to give her clansmen better lives. Darren, can I teach my clansmen South Sky Arrow art? Nan Yu asked. Of course, this was your South Sky Wisteria clan's Yao art in the first place, Zhuo Mo said with a smile. After passing it on to the 2, Zhuo Mo did not disturb them anymore. This was the best time for them to digest it. Zhuo Mo sat down and started to ponder the 2 Yao arts. Grey Scar art, and South Sky Arrow art, had been on his hands for a while, but he hadn't had the time to examine them. The 2 Yao arts had their unique aspects. Zhuo Mo had seen many Yao arts by now, and could see good or bad at a glance. Grey Scar art was a very unusual illusory killing Yao art, and the way of thinking was extremely strange. Zhuo Mo had to read it over 3 times before he understood. The requirements for cultivating South Sky Arrow art was even more strict. It was impossible to cultivate for anyone not a Wisteria Yao because only Wisteria Yao could create Wisteria arrows, and the succeeding string of arts could be cast. After reading through both sets of Yao arts, many of Zhuo Mo's questions disappeared. No wonder each Yao clan had their own inheritances. These inherited Yao arts were continuously developed and perfected based on the unique traits of their clan. It would not be a great problem even if these Yao arts ended up in the hands of other Yao clans because the other basically could not cultivate it. Even if they could, the power would decrease greatly. But if these Yao arts were lost, it was definitely a heavy blow to a clan. To Zhuo, these Yao arts were not of great use. Only now did he understand the power of the great thousand-leaf hands, and little thousand-leaf hands. These two Yao arts were ones that the great majority of clans could cultivate. Hey, there's an illusory formation. An arrogant voice suddenly came from the outside. Let's go, don't create trouble, another voice urged. Just a bit longer. The person inside is doing something that can't be seen in the light if they put up an illusory formation. Fine, be quick, a group of ripples came from the outside. Zhuo looked at Nan Yu and Sung Zhe still immersed in their thoughts, and two bolts of light came out of his eyes. He rose and walked out of the illusory formation. You're tuning into the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.